Calling the meeting to order. Would we please stand for the pledge? And Larry, would you do us the honor this morning?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Director Vallejo.
Present.
Director Heyman.
Here.
Chairman Kaczynski.
Here.
Director Page.
Present.
Vice Chair Gleason.
Here.
All right, I'll go ahead and open it for public comment. This time is reserved for the public to provide, for the public to address the board about matters not on the agenda. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Please come to the microphone and state your name, please.
My name is Lori Wagner, and I'm from the Inyokern area, and I'm returning for 3 minutes, part 2. A follow-up on my 3 minutes, part 1, at the May 16 meeting. This thing doesn't want to cooperate. I previously shared with you that you must pursue SGMA's lifting the current mandated January 2020 requirement for filing some kind of plan. Today I ask, have you done that? I never received any communication in answer to that from you. Did you read the copies of the letters I sent to our Sacramento representative and senator that I placed with your staff sitting in front of you last May 16? Back to the filing deadline. Until that deadline is lifted, you all will never accomplish anything, in many of our opinions. It will take a longer time to correctly and permanently fix this water mess here in the eastern side of the Sierras. If you do not have the political connection to lift this deadline, then I strongly urge you to file an injunction. I believe you have lawyers on staff here. Time to use them and get this show on the correct road. When you get the deadline lifted, we all then have a chance to work, at least in parallel, and all efforts can be expended toward resolution of the primary cause. We all know that unless the factor causing the absence of water throughout our eastern Sierras is resolved, this mess will just get worse and will never be corrected. In closing, I expect answers from you. My contact information is within the material I've handed to your staff, and I believe your staff has passed on copies to you. Thank you. See you for the next one.
Thank you.
Judy Decker, as a member of PAC and as a director on the Eastern Kern County Resource Conservation District Board, I have a question. My question is the city of Ridgecrest, which uses several hundred acre-feet of water annually, paying for their water over 2 acre-feet? Thank you.
Do you want me to respond?
My name is Nick Panzer. I reside in Ridgecrest. Chairman Kaczynski, I wish to comment on the first draft of GSP Section 3, Basin Setting. You have before you my written comments on that section, including regulatory authorities. As you can see, I have sent copies to Water Resource Manager Johnson. I see Jeff is here apparently in his place today. Jeff has his copy, and to PAC Chair Janice. Extra copies have been made available at the back table and at the front table. Here is my abridged version of those comments. I believe that this otherwise excellent draft fails to squarely face the two most salient risks that define our basin setting. First is the exceptionally high percentage of natural recharge required to cover the basic health and safety needs of our 35,000 residents. The draft does cover how much water we pump in relation to natural recharge, but it does not adequately cover the uses to which we actually put that water. This error of omission risks management actions that misallocate our natural recharge and thereby threaten public health and safety. The draft's second salient risk is an error of commission. Page 3-22 states, in part, natural sustainable yield can be augmented with direct recharge projects, for example, recycled water or imported water. This statement is risky because we simply do not know and will not know for a long time whether it is true or false. I say take it out lest it lead us to a misallocation of natural recharge and thereby threaten public health and safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further public comment? All right. Hearing none, we'll move on. I'll close the public comment section. And so we're on to a presentation by Well Intel, Lee Knutson. Are you here? All righty.
Hello, everybody. It's Lee Knutson with Well Intel. Can you hear me? Is it working? I'll make sure to get up close. About 80 days ago, we started the 60-day trial of use of our well monitoring systems. And I put together this little slide that the audience you can see up here, and I believe the board can see in front of you. And it overviews what we've done in the last 80 days or so. So there's 10 new monitoring points, and many of those have registered their well. Some already had their wells registered. There's been a lot of insight gained into the hydraulic properties of these wells. An example of that can be seen in the bottom left corner of the screen. The shape of that recovery curve during that pumping event speaks to the hydraulic conductivity of that well, and it can be used to refine the groundwater model. So that's just one of the many uses that this technology has brought. There was a survey that was passed around by Stetson to the well owners asking if they find this useful and how, and if the board should offer more of these systems to other well owners. And I believe that the feedback was pretty positive from what I saw, but Jeff can comment on that further if he feels like it. I think the most important thing that has come out of this network is demonstrated in that hydrograph on the right side of the screen. That's from a well in the northwest region of the basin, and you can see that there's some spikes down at the dips of the hydrographs. That's from his local pump drawing the water level down, and then it recovers rather quickly. The other ebbs and flows that you see there are caused by a local irrigator. So here at this well, we're seeing the cause and effect of irrigation on residential small domestic wells. This well owner has peace of mind understanding how the large irrigation pumps are affecting his well, and he can predict how much water he's going to have, understanding the rate of decline and the drawdown of his own pump. So he's really happy having this information. It's really the only well that has shown any significant change in static water levels since the beginning of this trial. And that's shown in the other graph, that's the background of this page. That graph was generated using Well Intel's analytics dashboard, which is a tool that's used to create graphs in an anonymous, non-personally identifiable way. So you can overview all the data from a network in the basin in a way that's meaningful, that you can understand at a glance, And essentially, those dots correspond with how much change has been seen over time, where blue represents the water level going slightly up over time, red represents it going down, and the size of the bubble representing how much it has changed. And as you can see, the only region where water levels have changed significantly in the last couple months is in the northwest region of or northwest region of the basin. So just to give you guys an idea of how these type of tools can be used, if you have more of these sensors scattered around the basement, you can start to pinpoint where water levels are changing, where management should be focused, which allows you to save money on on where you're allocating effort and management actions. That's most of what I have to share with you guys. I could sit up here and show you 4 or 5 slides, but I'd rather just show you one that's simple and concise and allow you to ask me questions about our technology and anything else that's on your mind. Thank you.
Which well is depicted in these graphs that you have? I see there's 2 graphs that are one particular well. Is that the one that's the big red bubble?
That's right.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
How many wells do you currently have monitored?
Well, there's 12. And there was 10 that were a part of this trial and a couple that were existing beforehand that are incorporated into your network. So 12 total.
12 total. And how long have they all been in the monitoring process?
10 of them have been monitoring for the last 80 days. And the other 2 have been monitoring since last June.
And the one that is depicted on the graph here, is that one from last June?
No, that's just the last couple months. And the hydrograph for that is the blue hydrograph on the right side of the screen.
And so the total time that's been monitored is how long?
About 80 days.
About 80 days?
Yeah. And the static water level has decreased by about 1.5 feet or 2 feet, where everywhere else in the basin there's been virtually no change.
But we haven't gone through like a full, 6 month, 8 month.
Excuse me?
We haven't gone through a full, like what I'd consider like a full cycle yet.
No,
so
we
it'd be
haven't.
interesting to see how that lays out over a year or 10 month pattern or.
Right. 1 year, 2 years. And then you can correspond pumping activity and land use with how the water levels are changing. Yeah. So luckily we were able to have an example of how just some cause and effect in the basin just within a couple month window. But the longer you have this, the more value it's going to yield. You're going to understand more about what's going on where.
Thanks.
Are you continuing to work with the water manager and Stetson on this information and the value of this process?
Yeah, we've been working together closely over the last month and a half or so. And when I spoke with him at the last TAC meeting, he said that he looks upon this favorably and he wants to expand the use of this technology.
Okay, because I know that we left the ultimate decision in the hand of the water manager and Stetson to determine if this program is good as it is and continues and such like that. So that's why I'm hoping that you'll continue to work with them and that eventually, Jeff, I would assume maybe we'll get a recommendation if we want to proceed with this program.
This was a 60-day trial.
Right.
So I think Lee is looking for some kind of indication today. We have looked at this data, and Lee did a good summary of it. There's interesting information there. We did do a survey, and I don't have statistics on it, but it generally, people were favorable incorporating this and having the data available. We could see, the strategic use of these wells in the GSP itself to try and monitor some of the shallow well impacts that we'll want to take a look at. I think it comes down to a question, though, of cash flow, and at this point, which I think is more of a board issue, we certainly could make use of this information. It's not, I have to be clear, it's not the critical information that's needed for the GSP at this time to develop it, and for the major monitoring points that we're identifying, but once we get the plan, get together, we're going to have particular areas where this kind of information will help fill in the gap as part of the implementing the plan.
Okay, so I understand that is information you believe will be valuable at some point, but not necessarily for the plan. And if that's the case, can we expect a recommendation from Stetson, call it post-plan, if we want to continue this, as well as the potential cost if we want to continue it?
Yes.
Okay. That's just my opinion as a board member. That's sort of what I'm asking for. If the rest of the board has any comment, I'd appreciate it. But I think that I'm looking to the water manager to make a recommendation as for another post-GSP monitoring and analytical tool, and what that would mean in cost to the GA. So that's what I'm looking for, unless the board has some other comments.
Be glad to weigh in. I didn't know that we were going to do this today, but I didn't know that we were going to make a decision on this today. I'm looking forward to exploring this. I like the technology. It looks good. It's going to give us an ability to fill gaps and to fine-tune decisions we make. I think it is not essential, from what I'm hearing from Stetson, to have this information to develop our GSP. My eyes are on that GSP development right now. If we want to have a way to use this information, then I'm going to need a cost-benefit analysis, and I'm going to need that after the GSP is done, and then we can review that data. So I'm looking forward to seeing this develop. I'm looking forward to using this information, but if it's not in the best interest of the GSP, I'm not willing to fund it today, but I would reconsider after the GSP is completed. Thanks.
John?
I know one of our primary considerations and concerns is the availability of water for our domestic well owners, and that's playing into the model runs that we are asking our staff to and contractors to run. And I'm wondering if, as part of any sort of cost-benefit analysis, we can explore the possibility of targeted wells to use this technology. I'm assuming that more data is better data. And if we're concerned about certain areas of domestic wells going dry and how that relates to the big picture of large pumpers and their effects on the surrounding domestic users, maybe there is a way to target certain wells. And if that's something that would be of great value to the GSP and making final decisions for this board, I think we should at least explore whether or not that value exists. And obviously the next step is how are we going to pay for it, because we have cash flow problems at the moment. So
I agree with Director Gleason. We're not here to make a decision today, and I think that as good as this looks, and that the effort needs to be on getting the GSP completed, and even though we may have to delay getting the cost-benefit analysis and selecting wells, we just need to know that it's still on the table at least. And I agree, cost-benefit analysis, what's it going to cost, what wells, but again, I wouldn't put a ton of effort in that yet until we know the GSP is ready to go. Otherwise, it takes a lot of time and effort. And that's where I'd like to move with it. So I sort of agree with John and Mick on that. And at this point, I'll ask Bob, do you have any questions?
No, I do not. Assuming that there was no recommendation before us, I would need some more time to evaluate this.
Okay. We heard there's not going to be any action, but you are breaking up there, so I don't know. So talk closer to the mic, I would say, if you can. But there's going to be no action here. It's just basically a presentation and maybe some guidance is all. And that's where we are. Unless you have anything more to offer to us.
Well, essentially what I'm hearing is you guys are asking for an extension of the trial period for an undetermined amount of time. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll let Jeff.
Lee, what would that entail as far as the proposal, the extension of the proposal at the rate that was in there, or what would that?
It would just consist of not being funded for this project that we've heavily discounted and fronted our costs for an undetermined amount of time. That's my understanding here.
Well, I think.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm not wanting to see you spend any more money than you have to. You've already sold me on your technology. I don't need to see further tests and evaluation. I believe that you can successfully fine-tune our GSP once it gets developed. I'm just waiting for a recommendation from Stetson on when we want to bring this technology in, if you want to bring this technology in. So I don't believe you need to spend any more money to convince me of your value, so I don't want you doing that. But I do want a recommendation from Stetson on when we're going to bring this in, or if he wants to bring it in. Does that help you?
It does, but Well-Intel's CEO Marion Singer's here, and I've already stuck my neck out quite a bit to front the costs for this technology to show it to you so everyone understands the value ahead of GSP development. And we would really appreciate the project being funded, at least this pilot project, and then we can talk about expanding it at some other point. Otherwise, I'm not sure we can continue to have these sensors installed on the wells. It's just, I don't know if we're able to justify it.
I think Director Gleason said it right. I think you convinced you convinced me of the technology and what it's capable of doing. There's no doubt about that. And I thought that was the intention of the trial period, to show us how it can help us. And but I do agree that I can't see at this particular point, because we are cash strapped, spending additional money to continue this particular model or testing until the GSP is complete, and then a recommendation comes from Stetson as to whether we want to continue this. But I would like to know in the long term that if we are going to do something like this, what are we looking at the yearly cost to the GA? But at this particular point, I agree with Director Gleason that if the whole idea was to convince us the technology is good, I feel pretty confident with it.
Well,
but I can't say where to go from there unless the water manager would come forward and agree with the staff that this is something we want to continue with and continue paying for until the decision is made how to continue with it. Then I'm not prepared to make a decision.
I think the concern is that the proposal was to install these monitoring technology for the trial period, and if we were going to move forward, great, we have the proposal in front of us, and if not, they were going to have to go out and remove all of those. And I think that's essentially what we're looking at this point, them removing the technology. And I think what you're hearing from the board right now is we don't have the funds at the moment line itemed out for this project, and we are interested in this project on a long-term basis, but not in the current immediate future. That's what I'm hearing from this board. And if that provides clarity for you in terms of what you need to do to move forward, great. And if not, please coordinate with Stetson to see if there's something that can be done between now and the next meeting to make sure everyone's on the same page with regard to at least where we are headed. So.
Okay, we'll coordinate with Stetson. I think that it's possible that we could front the cost for our services and technology for a little bit longer, but we'll have to discuss it as a team, and then we'll coordinate with Stetson and decide on an action moving forward. Does that sound good to everybody?
Okay.
I don't think you're understanding. The board is not asking you to fund anything further. You did a 60-day pilot project. The 60 days is over. And so however you terminate that pilot project, I think the board is directing you to do that. They've already seen the technology, and we have to have our GSP done by January 30th. And what I'm hearing the board say, and Stetson, is that this will be a valuable tool that we will look at post-GSP development. So you might be getting a call from us in February or March of 2020 about possibly starting this back up and doing a program to fill in the data gaps.
Okay. I
But
think
you
you're
can
going to
certainly
have some well owners who are disappointed by that, but we'll carry on in that way then.
I believe they'd be willing to, they'd be able to enter into their own agreement if they want to continue to receive that information.
It's possible. Okay.
I want to thank you for what you've done. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You've got some 12 wells out there with monitoring on it. You've shown a technology that we at least I believe in. Sounds to me like Stetson does too. So I want to thank you for your time and effort in it. And I'm hoping that some of these well owners will want to continue with it because if they see the benefit themselves as well. And I think, Jim, you said it right that come February or somewhere in there, you could very well be saying, hey, here's what we need for data gap filling and how are we going to do it and what's it going to cost. But I want to thank you.
Well, you're welcome, Ron. Okay.
Is there any comment from the public before I move on?
Okay, I'm Tim Carroll. I'm on the PAC, and also I'm a board member at the Current Community Services District. And I've also done a lot of water management work for University of California, for the Navy, and for the Air Force over the years. The last comment from the attorney has triggered me. I think clarification of information is not something that attorneys normally do. I think we're being a little bit penny wise and pound foolish to not take real data when we have a chance to get it. And I'm going to stop talking now because I could get carried away with how some of the money's been spent already.
Earl Wilson, I'm on the TAC representing the RCD. Data gaps. Willing individual well owners that are willing to give the data to you. Weren't asked to spend a lot of money on this. Just remember that. Thank you.
My name is Peggy Breed, and I speak as an individual here. I think we're being very short-sighted to cut this off at this point in time. I think it's important that this data is generated and kept. I would ask that you look at that one more time and say maybe all the wells that you're getting information from are not the ones that are most appropriate to fill data gaps, but to cut it off and say no is short-sighted. I don't know how much money is involved. I'm not asking that you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, but as I understand, the money on each individual well was in the hundreds of dollars. Am I incorrect in that? Does anyone know that? Lee, can you answer that?
The total cost for these TED monitoring points is about $12,000, which is about the fourth of the cost for real-time continuous monitoring systems using other technologies.
Okay, whatever the cost is, I would like us to look at what the cost of each individual well would be and to see if you can fill any data gaps and not cut it off at this point in time because it may help you develop the GSP even more fully. Thank you.
Yes, Larry Mead. This is great to have this kind of data and get this information. I just have a problem with the big orange dot from looking at the valley and for the city, publicizing a 2-foot drawdown and not specifically saying where the well is or what the construction of the well is and how far the neighboring wells are and what the neighboring wells are doing is bad data for this valley to have, because what you're doing to any developer that wants to come into this valley and invest any money, the first thing they're going to be looking at is, wow, we got a 2-foot drawdown in just a short period of time. I wish you guys would look at that and kind of define where the wells are and what's going on in and around them, because it doesn't look good on, for the Navy or anybody else to invite people here.
I think that's a good point by Larry, and if this data was continuing to be generated, I think we'd see a response or a recovery in the water levels come the fall when the pumps shut off, and I think the model reflects that too. And one other thing in regards to ongoing costs, the ongoing costs are about $2,000 per year for this. So the initial project setup would be $12,000. The ongoing cost would be $2,000 a year thereafter. So I just want to get those numbers on the table. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are right there in our proposal. It's in the packet. I think really we need to look at item 9 before we make any decisions about any new programs that we're going to fund. Item 9 being the update on our current financial situation.
I agree. I see that our initial cost was basically $11,880. That's to get this test in for 60 days. And what you're saying to continue that is about $2,000 a year, roughly,
Yes. Correct.
to continue data on these. Okay.
Right.
And then any recommendation down the line to add additional ones, their additional costs would be on top of it. But just to continue monitoring these. Okay. Thank you.
Stan Rotora. I think we all recognize the importance of getting the GSP done. I think we also all recognize the fact that we're behind schedule and we're underfunded to get it done in the time frame that we want to get it done. We have existing financial problems. There have been many of us from the audience here who have recommended for the last 2-3 years that we get our financial house in order. And clearly, we haven't. We really, as I see it, we're causing a system or an opportunity that's going to cost very little, provide us a good deal of information, and could very well serve to support our GSP. For a few $1,000s, we're saying, nope, we can't do it. My feeling is, I agree with the lady who spoke earlier, it's short-sighted. We need to go back and review how this can be used to help the GSP. And primarily, we need to get our financial house in order. We can't keep going on every month saying we got a cash flow problem, we got a cash flow problem is getting worse. We got to do something about it, all right? So I'd like you to, first of all, do something about our cash flow problem. Second of all, revisit these few $1,000s that could be very beneficial to helping us get our GSP through DWR. Thank you.
Wes Katzenstein, member of the PAC, domestic well owner. And in my mind, there's kind of a technical question. I would think that data from a system like this, and I'm not going to tell you whether or not to adopt it, but I think it should be validated by comparing the numbers with the measurements that are taken yearly around the basin. Makes me a little bit nervous to see, those horizontal curves along the top with no drop. Maybe that is the actual fact, but I think that there's a technical question. We need to validate this system to be sure that the answers it gets agrees with the well monitoring that's going on.
Judy Decker, I'm speaking as an individual. You get, twice a year, you get well measurements from the Kern Water Agency that have been occurring for at least the past 30 years. They cover the entire basin, not 12 wells. I think you have been sidetracked by this issue. It was interesting, but as other people have stated, you are way behind on the GSP. You need to concentrate all of your money and all of your time on completing that. Thank you.
Any more from the public? If not, I'll bring it back to the board for any last comments. Scott, did you have something at one time?
No, it was answered
okay.
already.
All right.
Thank you.
Director Gleason?
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'd like to know how, not being critical, but how did this item get on did this item go through the TAC? Has this been reviewed by the TAC? And so it came to the TAC, and out of the TAC, did it come to a recommendation from Stetson? What I would like to see, when things come out of the TAC, it has to come with a recommendation from Stetson Engineering, tell us what we should do, how we should act, and how we should decide on the issue in front of us, whether we should go with it or not. Whether we agree with you or not is secondary, but it has to come with a recommendation. What is the recommendation of Stetson Engineering?
Well, our conclusion at looking at this information is that it is good information. We could see more value in it if we strategically locate the wells. Once we have our management plan in place and we're more certain of where the critical areas are. But this is valuable information. We would like to continue to get it, but we recognize, again, it's the board's call on the cash flow issue, and we like the data. We'd like to continue to get it, but it's not the critical data for the GSP.
Your recommendation is what?
Well, we would recommend for the technical purpose that it continue.
And you're saying, but what's the financial perspective on this thing? Is it budgeted? Are you going to put it in the budget?
It's not in the budget for...
Are you willing to spend money on this, vice other things?
No. Not with everything we got in front of us.
Thank you very much.
Any more from the board? All right. Hearing nothing, we'll go ahead and move on to the consent agenda. And so let's go ahead and take these one at a time because I believe we have some resolutions on here that or Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, do we need to take them one at a time or can I take them as the full consent agenda? Yeah, or as long as I read every one of them.
We always do, well, you do the roll, just pull the two resolutions, do a roll call vote on those, and the rest you can go under consent agenda.
Okay, if the rest of the board agrees, I'll go ahead and pull item B and C, the two resolutions, so we can do a roll call vote on them. And go ahead and ask for a motion to approve the remaining part of the consent agenda, minus B and C.
Director Kaczynski.
Yes.
Can I take a comment on D, please? We're doing a little different approach this month as opposed to past months. You see all the invoices listed there. We're anticipating any day now getting the funding from DWR, so we're asking for board approval of these invoices so that when we do get the money, we can go ahead and issue the checks and not wait until next board meeting for approval. So just to clarify, these will be approved, and when we get the funds in, we'll make the payments. What we anticipate will be before the next board meeting.
Okay. I was sort of hoping the check would show up today so we can. Does the board understand what Don is asking, that we're pre-approving some payment so they can be paid immediately when the first check comes in from the grant without having to wait another month to pay these? So that's what we're asking for.
Keep D on the agenda. And
yeah, keep D on the agenda. So I'm asking for a motion for A and D.
I'll move that.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All righty. Are there any comments from the public before I move on for a vote? All righty. Hearing none, I'll ask for a vote.
Director Vallejo,
I'm going to abstain.
Director Heyman,
Yes.
Chairman Kaczynski,
Yes.
Director Page,
Yes.
Vice Chair Gleason.
Yes.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to B, approval of resolution number 0219, appointing Thomas Bikoskis. Is that correct? I got it right. All right. I've been practicing it for the last 10 hours as a PAC representative for the Bureau of Land Management. So I'm looking for a motion to approve that resolution. I can get a motion. I can ask for public after. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Then I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any public comment or board comment before we move on? If none, I'll ask for a vote.
Director Vallejo,
Aye.
Director Heyman,
Yes.
Chairman Kaczynski,
Yes.
Director Page,
Yes.
Vice Chair Gleason.
Yes.
Thank you. And we're on to the next resolution, number 0319, appointing Mallory John Boyd as a TAC representative for business interests. And am I to assume this is the replacement for Scott? And I'll take this time to thank Scott for his time on the TAC as well. But anyway, go ahead, Mr. Gleason.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. Scott, thank you very much for all your support. Appreciate everything you've done. I've got to be completely upfront with everybody so they know this is a replacement as a business member, but I have recently taken on a financial relationship with Mr. Boyd. And my relationship with him is a part-time employee for Kern County, for me, as a county employee, and his job definition is to become the smartest man in the Indian Wells Valley on groundwater. It's going to take several years for him to accomplish that, but his total scope of responsibilities as defined now is to read and to understand and to form independent opinions, not mine, his, and then provide me and us counsel on those on that knowledge that he's acquiring. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you need a motion, I'll move it. Oh, okay. I don't think I should probably move it.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to approve the resolution.
Motion to approve.
A second. Thank you. Anything from the public?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Board. Derek Hoffman, attorney from Meadowbrook. And I do have a couple comments. This individual seems like a fine individual. Mr. Boyd honorably served our country, and he has an impressive resume. And I've understood Supervisor Gleason's comment to be that he is to become the smartest man in the basin on groundwater matters. And that's a tall task considering the brains we have here already. But as I look at the bylaws for qualifications for TAC members, Section 5.12 provides that in order to qualify as a member of the TAC, the member must have formal education in a groundwater-related field and have a technical understanding of the basin or similar basins in California. And so while the task for him to get up to speed is respectable, my view on it is that he ought to already have that expertise as required by the bylaws in order to be a member of the TAC. To be a member of the PAC would be a different scenario, but I'm looking at this resume and I see that Mr. Boyd has formal education in electronics and computer engineering. He has a Master's of Science in Administration, and he has a lot of experience working for the Navy on what appears to be weapons development and software systems. But I don't see anywhere in his resume where there is a expertise in water, which is a requirement and qualification under the bylaws to be a member of the TAC. And so my question would be, why would the board consider departing from those qualifications that are included in the bylaws? And what would be the justification for including this respectable individual who lacks that qualification on the TAC when the TAC is tasked with such technical work pertaining specifically to groundwater matters? A long question, but that's my question. Thank you.
And all due respect to Scott, correct me if I'm wrong. Scott, I mean, did you do a lot of study in groundwater development in the valley and our aquifer? You were mostly technical on the weapons center. Is that correct? Okay, so I think in my opinion, the board has already appointed, when they appointed Scott, someone for the TAC that didn't have those exact qualifications, but was more than qualified. That's just my opinion. Any other comment from the board?
I would just note that the bylaws say a related field. It doesn't have a very specific field that you're mandated to have the formal education in. Actually, I think there's some leeway there for the board to make its discretionary decisions about who it wants to put on these committees.
I agree that there is some discretion, but the bylaws say specifically a formal education and experience in a groundwater-related field, not a groundwater or related field. So I think if we're reading specific language here, my point is if we're going to ask, if the board's going to consider assigning someone to the TAC to handle and weigh in on technical matters pertaining to groundwater, I'd like to hear what the reasoning for that is when it's already been stated that this individual lacks that knowledge at the moment. And this is no disrespect to Mr. Boyd. It's simply a matter of trying to preserve the integrity of the TAC, given its important work. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Any more from the board? Hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and ask for the vote.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Director Heyman.
Yes.
Chairman Kaczynski.
Yes.
Director Page.
Yes.
Vice Chair Gleason.
Abstain.
All right, moving on. Presentation on requests for proposals for severely disadvantaged communities, water audit, leak detection, and repair program. I guess, Jeff, you have people lined up for that?
I do. There's a little bit of an overview on items 5 and 6. When we were putting together the Prop 1 funding application, there were two sections to the application, and one of them was specifically, the second one was for preparation of the GSP itself. The first section of the application was specifically for projects for SDACs related to water management, water conservation, and support of the GSP. So we put in an application for two projects. The first one that we'll hear about is a water audit, leak detection, and repair program. And we sent out a request for proposal or a request for qualifications to administer this program. The request for qualifications went through, I believe, the TAC some time ago. We had actually delayed this process, again, as the board was looking at cash flow issues. We waited first for the Prop 1 funding agreement to be in place and then to address cash flow problems. But we did send out the request for proposal on this first project, which is the water audit, leak detection, and repair program. We got 3 proposals, and all 3 of the proposers are here to present today. And our first proposer for a presentation is Pure Technologies, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Mr. Chair, this is Bob. Could I interject?
Good morning, all.
Excuse us, please. Bob, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just hoping that the water resource manager could. I understand we're going to have proposals, but what is the recommendation at the end that the board? Are we just hearing the presentations and then at the next meeting we're going to make a decision? What's the recommendation from staff in terms of how this process goes?
That's a good question. I did leave that out. What we are planning to do is similar to what we did with the imported water marketing proposals that we got as far as an evaluation. We'll hear the presentations today. We've been reviewing the proposals that we've received, preparing a summary of that review. We plan to take the proposals and our summary review and the results of the presentations today to the ad hoc imported water committee we have, which is the chair and the general manager, the chairs of the TAC and the PAC, and the water resource manager, and have a review of those and come back with a recommendation to the board, potentially in July. Again, we need to look at cash flow issues and overlay that on this, and you'll have a discussion of your finances later. But that's the plan for evaluation and recommendation.
Thank you, and I agree with that.
So basically just an ordinal type of ranking. There's no specific criteria we're supposed to be evaluating the presentation on?
The request for qualifications did have a set of criteria for evaluating the proposals that were submitted. We had not put those forward for the presentations themselves, although we'll be reviewing it in that light.
Okay, thank you.
All right, are we ready to move on? Any other questions or comments? All right.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us here this morning. My name is Carl Sharkey, Business Development Director with Xylem, of which Pure Technologies is a part of. I'm here today with my colleagues Pamela Webster Malone and Asha McNeely. I'm pleased to present our proposed solution to your Groundwater Authority Audit. Okay, thank you. Leak Detection and Repair Program. So looking at your program goals and the benefits that we intend to bring, let's restate what we're trying to, Let's restate what we're trying to achieve here. So we're trying to implement requirements for the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. We're trying to benefit severely disadvantaged communities, protect your groundwater basement, and of course your water supply. We're trying to identify and quantify metering inaccuracies within your system. We're trying to reduce and control water loss from pipe leakage, from inaccurate meters, and from theft, and preserve and protect your assets and your limited resources. A little bit about Pure Technologies. We've completed well over 40 audits, such as the one outlined within the proposal. We have surveyed over 17,000 miles of pipe, and we found over 7,000 leaks within that. We've analyzed over 3 million meters to date, and we've been doing this for quite a long time, over 30 years. We have 500 engineers, scientists, technicians, and over 15 offices. Now, what I would add to this, and is extremely important, is Pure Technologies is part of Xylem. Xylem is a global water company with over 17,000 employees and hundreds of offices in North America. Pure is part of a platform within Xylem called Advanced Infrastructure Analytics. And within that platform, there's 9 companies. So the capabilities of all those companies will be brought to bear on this project as and when they're needed. We have worked with a wide array of clients here in California, from very large utilities to very small utilities in a variety of different projects. One relatively local utility we worked with is Corona, where we started just looking at their hydrants, doing hydrant inspections, and they were pleased with that work, so it expanded into also looking at their valves, making sure valves work to control. If you have leakage, the impact of a leak is directly correlated to how fast you can control that leak. How fast can you shut down that leak? And control over your valves is extremely important. So they implemented a valve inspection program too. That grew into, because you had people in the field using those dynamic assets, inspecting them, they also says, well, while you're out there, let's look for leakage. So that's an ongoing program with Corona. It's been extremely successful. It's a year-on-year endeavor. So that's just one example of what we're doing out there. So as laid out in the proposal, phase one is the water audit. And this is mandated within the state for every utility that's got 3,000 or more services, 3,000 or more meter connections. So what we want to do within the water audit is really understand what's going on in your system. We want to see what's being introduced from all your master meters into your system. How much water are you putting into your system? And we need to see how good is your data on all that. When's the last time you calibrated your master meters? When is the last time they were tested? Not just calibrated, but actually tested. So once we have a good handle of that, then we'll look at, okay, what's been taken out of the system? So now we know what's going into the system, what's been taken out. And that what's been taken out is consumption, right? So that's your customer sales. Now that's including your meter accuracy. So if we don't have a handle on our meter accuracy, we're going to have to make a lot of assumptions. And including in that assumption is, what is our leakage? If we don't know our meter accuracy, everything else is just based on best assumptions at that stage. So we really need to get a handle on that. So we want to understand what's also being used that's not metered. What is authorized usage by our utilities for parks, by the fire service? What is being used, and what's the best estimate of what's being used? Once we know what's metered usage, once we know what's authorized usage that's not unmetered, then we're left with leakage. That's what we're chasing to reduce our losses. That's our trying to save the precious resource, right? If we're overdrawing from our groundwater basin, how do we try and alleviate this problem here? Well, we try and recover our losses, and that's our leakage. But we need to know what our leakage is first. So we need to do these audits annually, using best management practices, using the AWWA free software. That's the American Waterworks Association. Then we can identify our NRW, our non-revenue water, and from that come up with reduction programs, come up with recommended programs to reduce our non-revenue water. So we'll need to, at the start of this, we'll need to go through a discovery process. So we need to gather and review all your disadvantaged communities' information. What data do they have to help fill out this audit? And there's going to be gaps in that information. This is not something that's been done before, so we have to understand what we have to work with. And from that, we'll understand what other information we need, right? So the first audit's not going to be perfect, but we work towards making it better. So we'll need to understand what do we have to work with today. And each audit is given a validity score. How good is the audit? How confident are we in this audit based on the data available? So we want to keep on making these audits better every year. So we want to establish the availability of data, then develop a work plan in conjunction with each utility. What's going to work best? Who's available to work? Who's the head person in each utility to put this together? Who are we working with? And review the work plan with yourselves and with each utility. So including outreach, communication, and coordination. It's going to be a very hands-on managed process. And then the water audit itself will be completed and described. and it's something that we keep track of and make use of. It's not just a document that we fill out. We now base our actions off of it. So there is an audit questionnaire, and that will give us guidance as to what information is needed. So it's all laid out for us. It's a standard questionnaire that's being developed for us. We'll develop spreadsheets, and we'll look at calculations, assumptions, estimates. Where are we weak on data? Where are we strong on data? How did we come up with that data? How confident are we in that data? Now, then we'll enter the data into the software, that free software that's available from the American Waterworks Association. We'll analyze results, and we'll compare our performance indicators with industry values. How are we doing compared to industry standards? And where do we need to improve? From that, we'll develop a program based on the results of our audits. We'll develop a program of what do we need to do next? What areas are we particularly weak in, and what areas give us the best bang for our buck, gives us the biggest opportunity to recover our losses? And then we'll implement those programs. So we're looking for areas that, where's the low-hanging fruit? As we go further and further into this, we'll have achieved our biggest gains, and then it'll get harder and harder to recover losses. But at the start, we'll have areas where we can cover losses more easily. So we want to identify leakage, and in the water audit terminology, leakage is described as a real loss. It's loss that we're losing into the ground. It's gone. And we also want to identify apparent losses. And apparent losses is metering inaccuracies. It's water that we've treated, we've pumped through our system, we've delivered, and it's being consumed. But due to a metering inaccuracy, we haven't actually billed for. So we've delivered our product, it's been consumed, but we haven't got paid for it. How do we rectify that? And that's the lifeblood of our utilities, right? We need to get paid for what we're actually delivering. That funds every other program that we're doing. So we need to get paid. It's equity within our system. Everybody gets paid. Everybody gets billed for what they're using. It's not fair to charge somebody 100% for what they're using and somebody else 50% for what they're using. Everybody should pay the same. So if we take into phase 2, the first thing we'll look at is metering inaccuracies. And Valor Water Analytics, the title of this slide, Valor is part of this advanced infrastructure analytics platform. It's a sister company to Pure Technologies. So it's really, let me put it this way, Pure Technologies, Valor, it doesn't really matter. This is a Xylem solution. So the problem, as stated, is apparent losses impact your water losses, your idea of your understanding of your water losses, and your financial sustainability. And a good average that is being found through experience is about 2% of your top line revenue is lost to apparent losses. So take your top line revenues, both water and wastewater, if your wastewater is billed off your water bill, and you're losing about 2% of that to metering inaccuracies. So your water balance calculation uncertainty is also now in question because you can't say what your leakage is if you don't know what's being consumed. It's just your best guess. So your solution is to identify where those losses are. Which meters are not working correctly? And how badly are they not working? And when did that problem start? So locate the meters that are under registering. Locate where there's leaks on the property side. Locate where there's data handling errors in your metering system. Locate where there's unauthorized consumption. And if you do all that, you'll find that on average about 5% of your meters have some sort of issue. And you can recover, potentially what's on the table is you can recover about 1.5% of that 2% that you're losing. So that's a lot of money that comes back into your system that can be used to fund conservation programs, be used to fund leakage programs. It can be used in a myriad ways to improve your water system. So it empowers proactive revenue recovery and operational efficiencies. You don't need to just replace meters because they're old anymore. You're just replacing the bad apples. The process is you already have data that you're collecting every month or every couple of months to use for billing purposes. You collect meter reads, you understand what people are using, and you bill them based on that. So you have that information. There's no extra manpower involved there. You provide that information to us. We use Amazon's AWS cloud computing power. we've machine learning, we've advanced algorithms. We try to identify which meters have inaccuracies due to mechanical degradation only. Not consumption patterns that are just declining, because that could be behavioral. That could be somebody moved out of the house. That could be a conservation program. That could be wetter summer. It could be anything like that. We're trying to identify which meters are now underperforming based on the degradation of the meter itself. And we give you an output that you see on a dashboard, and that's what you can act on. The things we take into account is the meter age, how much water, the throughput, how much water has passed through that meter since it was installed, the degradation curve, what is the historical consumption of that meter? What does it look like? How does its performance, how does its consumption pattern look against itself? Is there particular patterns that we see from year to year? Does somebody move in for 3 months every year and that changes its consumption pattern? Things like that. So we would be looking for historical records. Scaled consumption is, well, if that meter is showing anomalous performance, is it anomalous against its neighbors also? Or is there something that's happening within the local region? Is it something that is reflective of a conservation program where all the meters in this area are now showing lower consumption? If you have water quality reports that you can share with us, that will be factored in also. And it is a learning, relearning process, of machine learning. So feedback from your field investigations of meters that we have flagged as being inaccurate will then be fed back into these algorithms, and the process becomes iterative. It becomes a learning process. So the algorithm gets smarter and smarter and hones more to your local conditions. So over time, the precision rate gets higher and higher. This is just some sample return on investments that you'll see. Anything from 59% on the real low end from a system that's really tight, had a very, very active testing and replacement program, all the way up to almost 2,000% for a utility that just, when a meter died, it went out there and replaced it. That's all it did. So there's a lot of return on investment. There's a lot of revenue to be recovered, and that revenue really is the starting point for everything else you're going to be doing in this program. Revenues are never in a surplus, right? So this is crucial that you recover as much as you can to fund other programs. So the value proposition of using this as the starting point within your phase one is that it's a meter asset management. So you understand what's going on with your meters. It provides economic justification for all meter replacements. It lets you prioritize your meter replacement program. And because it's an ongoing process, you understand which meter is being underbilled the most per month. You have a prioritized list. If you have 1,000 meters that are under registering, you know which one is costing the most. Which one are you underbilling by the most? This one is the first meter you should replace. This is the second meter you should replace. It's not just a list of 1,000 meters, go replace them. If you can only replace 50 meters, these are the first 50 you should replace. That will give you the most return on your investment in terms of revenues, and that will make the biggest impact on your water losses. When you have limited staff resources, your staff is going out to the meters that make the biggest impact. You can't cover all the meters that have an issue, so go out to the ones that make the biggest impact. That's what I mean by operational resources. And revenue protection. If your apparent losses mightn't be as large in volume as your real losses, but they're valued at retail rate rather than cost. So they make a huge difference to your balance sheet. So it's revenue protection. And with that, I'm going to pass on to my colleague, Ashen, just to describe the real loss side of Phase 2.
Thank you, Carl. So as he was saying, I'll discuss Phase 2 of the program. Our approach for Phase 2 is all about leak management, leak detection. And the first step of that is the external leak detection with leak loggers, leak surveys, data collection, and essentially data quality analysis and guarantees. And then we can establish virtual DMAs, and through that you get some synergistic effects with pressure optimization to increase asset life across the utilities, because with lower pressure, not only are you automatically for free getting reduced leak rates, but you're also putting less structural strain on your pipelines. And then finally, there's also some innovative approaches we can bring with condition main of your linear assets, both distribution system and transmission systems. So for external leak detection process, we start with the survey in the field. We have a unique platform of field tablets that all our leak detection operators carry with them, that allows them to basically be more efficient and provide a higher quality of data. They can get to the asset faster, verify its location, its type, etc. And then they'll initiate the leak survey with leak loggers, going around at the most efficient method of doing external leak detection with leak loggers. As leaks are detected with these loggers, they will triangulate their location and place the leak correlators to get a pinpoint. And then once the pinpoint is located with the correlators, you go out there with an X mic, a ground mic, and verify it. And then we can repair it. We also have a team member that has some unique, innovative repair approaches for certain difficult repair situations. So this is an image of the field software. So we have something called Project Tracker that allows us to have a centralized database and report immediately, both internally and externally, to external stakeholders, where our teams are at with the leak detection process and what they're finding live. It also enables the daily logs and any other kind of reporting that's required. This is additionally a tool that helps increase efficiency and data quality, since we're operating off of known information in the field. Another thing about the Leak Project Tracker is when something is detected, we can take a picture of that allows the follow-up crews, whether it's with the correlator or with repair, to know exactly what they're talking about. Just another aspect of making sure the whole process is done properly with increased quality. So one of the brands Carl was mentioning that we have a bunch of brands in advanced infrastructure analytics is Vicenti, and they provide something that's quite innovative. It would be an optional component to our approach, and it involves continuous leak pressure and flow monitoring systems that aggregate data in the Leak View platform. And this platform basically gives you both basically the latest in leak detection capabilities with continuous monitoring. It also helps with reduced breakage rates, because with the pressure monitoring we can determine where surges may be happening due to valves, PRVs and such like, and those things that cause mains to fail early. For transmission mains, we have some platforms that address the weaknesses in external leak detection technologies. Both the Sahara and the SmartBall are inline leak detection technologies. So what they do is they bring the hydrophone, the sensor that detects a leak, into the pipe and brings it right next to any potential leak. So as you're inspecting pipes of larger and larger diameter, generally as you start going above 12 inches, if any of the transmission mains in the system were in that range, you may have trouble with the normal industry standard external leak detection systems that are trying to find leaks from hundreds or more feet away. And you get higher precision and accuracy with these systems. So we feel that basically our approach and our team bring the keys to success for your proposal. Not only do we have a highly experienced program team both an industry leading expert in water audits with over 40 water audits and 40 years of experience. We have a plethora of technologies to apply to the individual problems that may be reached, and those are all pretty much leading industry solutions. All of these solutions were developed and implemented with the goal of providing actionable information. So it's all about decision support, and finally, it basically allows that bottom line revenue that Carl was talking about earlier to make a sustainable program. It brings revenue back in to the utilities to fund other programs like conservation programs. Do you have any questions?
Any questions from the board? Hearing none, I guess we have none. Does the public have any particular questions? Yeah, okay. Let's hold off to all the presentations for the public comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, the next firm we have presenting is M.E. Simpson Company, and they have a representative, and I think they have one or two associates on the phone also.
Good morning. My name is Steve Dennis. I'm the California West Coast representative for M.E. Simpson, and on the phone with us is our president and CEO, Mike Simpson. Mike, if you're there, if you could drop the mute and say hello.
Good morning, everyone.
So, first of all, I'd like to express our appreciation for being able to make this presentation and bring forward our proposal for the water audit and leak detection and repair program. Before I begin, a little bit of background on myself. I've worked for Simpson for about 3 years. Prior to that, I had a 38-plus year career with a large water utility in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I mention this because in being in the meeting here and hearing about your different challenges in your groundwater and knowing about those, I worked more than 10 years in groundwater protection for my agency, the Alameda County Water District, to help protect our groundwater basin throughout that process as well. So there's a nexus there that I just wanted to mention. So this presentation today, I'd like to just briefly introduce M.E. Simpson with some of our background and experience. I'll go into the project approach and the process that we believe will be effective in addressing the water audit and leak detection and repair program. Talk a little bit about water loss audits and validation, leak detection. If you've heard about those with the previous presenter, I'm going to build upon that and perhaps provide a little different perspective. And then lastly, I will also provide comments on why we believe we will be the best to deliver program success here. This slide depicts our experience, who we are. We offer our clients the highest quality technical and professional services. We use state-of-the-art technologies and highly skilled trained professionals. So we've been in this business for about 40 years, provided here with the bulleted list. First, I'll say our water loss control audit and audit validations. We've performed more than 100 water audits, actually prior to really California's regulation requiring them, quite a bit prior, actually in the 1990s. In years of late, we've continued to perform audits for utilities throughout the nation, and also are experienced in water audit validations. We have 2 California certified water audit validators on board, myself being one of those. And I can say that since the regulation with the requirement for all utilities of a certain size to send their audits into the state board with validation, I've performed about 50 water audit validations. I'm currently on staff with the California-Nevada AWWA as a trainer for water loss control audits, training utilities on how to perform these water audits. I'll get into a little bit more specifics about the water audits in a little bit. we have a vast experience in water detection and leak surveys. We've done this for more than 30 years, and the tools, as you were just informed by the previous presenter, have evolved and gotten better. We've also evolved and used those same tools. We like to reinforce the fact that we do non-invasive leak detection and water pipeline condition assessments without having to enter the pipe. That's part of our program, and I'll talk a little bit more about our leak detection tools and how we approach that. In addition, you'll see that we do large meter evaluations and accuracy testing. That's something that the company was founded upon back in the 70s. We also conduct fire hydrant flow testing and flushing programs and have set those up in different California utilities over the years. And we also do employ a GPS locating CAD mapping system for asset management for water utilities. So now I'll talk about specifics on what we would actually do, our approach for actually completing this program for you and working on this project. First and foremost, we recognize that the severely disadvantaged communities, the SDACs, and the different water utilities that are going to be part of this program will need to be studied and evaluated. And that, in our opinion, will take communication with all key stakeholders. So specifically, once we move forward with this, it will be at least a 2 to 5 day information gathering project where myself and another Emmy Simpson professional will come in and get to know the systems, get to learn specifically about each utility and talking to the people who know those systems, because as I'm sure you know, of the different utilities that are working here, each utility has at least one person who best knows how that system is laid out. And some of the small utilities, maybe that's the only person that really knows how that system is laid out. We can't perform a good assessment and conduct water audits unless we get very close to those key stakeholders. And so we would propose that that would be the first critical step that we would do. Come in, work with the project manager with Indian Wells, and then really immerse ourselves in this area relative to getting to know all these utilities. We would do a data mining for all the records that we can, all the paper records you have or any utilities have on their system, and of course go and visit the utility sites themselves, drive the sites perhaps with that key stakeholder so that we get to know it from our perspective as well as we can before we implement the water audit process and also the leak detection surveys. Obviously, we'll need to use this information to help us identify which SDACs we need to focus on and priority-based so that we can get the largest benefit and value from the effort that we are going to bring forward. We'll develop a work plan, working closely with the Indian Wells project manager, using the information that we gather. And then with that, throughout that process, we will be developing program and project outreach materials so that we make sure that your communities understand exactly what's happening relative to this work. It's important as we go forward that the customer understands the water audit as well as the people that are working on the water audit, because the benefits as such, as have been discussed previously, are paramount to the financial stability and sustainability for utilities. So we would, this is the very first and we believe the most critical step towards getting the job done well. Next, we would conduct water audits using the AWWA EPA-approved water audit software, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And that will, again, not to belabor the point, but we'll gather all water supply data, all metered production numbers, consumption numbers. The audit will calculate apparent loss, which you've heard a little bit about. I'll talk about in a couple minutes a little bit more. Real loss, leaks, and so forth. and then go over the performance indicators that audit brings forward, essentially developing a roadmap for improvement system by system. And all systems, while there could be some commonalities in what needs to perhaps be addressed, be it metering accuracy or other things such as accounting inaccuracies and so forth, we'll develop those programs per utility as we go forward, and ultimately that we bring forward as a program deliverable. Once we do that, we will review that calculated real loss data from the audits, and we know that we're going to implement a leak detection survey program and repair service, and so we'll go through using tools of the trade that have been talked about. I have another slide that I'll present on those. State-of-the-art tools to find leaks, pinpoint leaks, and minimize the excavation through that pinpointing for the repair of those leaks. We'd classify all those leaks by severity, and we can do that through the technology that we have based upon the acoustic fingerprint that those leaks present. We plan to facilitate these leak repairs using local contractors. So while we can't bring forward to you a list of the specific contractors that will be digging up the ground and actually making the repairs, we're in the process of developing that list and talking to different area contractors to come in and give us the biggest bang for the buck to make these leak repairs in concert and working with the program manager as well as the local utility main point of contact, the key personnel there. So a little bit on water audits. As I said, I don't want to belabor the point, but the water audit process is key now. It is, again, it's California regulation on an annual basis for those audits to be turned into the state board. It shows the need to develop, implement benchmarks for performance indicators, and really ask the questions, where in our system are we losing water and or revenue? And as discussed before, water is revenue. If you're paying for the water to make it and put it in the system and it's not being utilized for the purposes that you've produced it for, you're losing revenue. So the water audit will definitely increase the utility's financial standing and essentially the benefits for sustainability moving forward. This slide, if you haven't seen it, depicts the AWWA water audit. This is the reporting page. It's the let's call it the main page for the water audit. And so starting at the top, it's a top-down water audit. At the top, we capture all the data relative to water supplied. Once that's there, to the right of that top section has a master meter error adjustment. So with metering accuracy tests, you understand, or a utility can understand where their meters may be inaccurate, and they make that percentage or quantity adjustment based on testing there. Ultimately, you list all the authorized consumption you have. That's all the meters that are read and totalized by customer class, if you have that data. And the program then develops a water loss, it presents a water loss number for you. You can then build in for your apparent losses, which is the third or the medium section of this reporting form. Apparent losses being, as I said, inaccuracies in financial accounting, just unavoidable errors in the way utilities put together their numbers for quantifying their billing and putting it out. We know there are inaccuracies there, and so the water audit captures these. And I'll talk a little bit more about apparent losses, but ultimately the audit quantifies, gives you a number for the apparent and the real losses. It also incorporates system data, which is key to this because apparent losses and real losses are directly related to pressure controls in a system. water leaks faster if you have pressure spikes or if you push a high pressure out through a system that isn't tight. It develops, it incorporates cost data, and as was mentioned before, all of these data points have a data validity score that go in. That data validity score is just what it says. If the data that you have to work with to develop the number that goes into this audit is not very sound, and there's estimates say, the validity score will reflect that as a lower number. So the utility ultimately does get a grade for how well they are collecting data in all of these areas, and then that gives them a roadmap for improvement moving forward in future years. This slide just basically talks about non-revenue water and how the audit looks at it, and real losses and apparent losses, so forth. Inaccuracy, theft is a loss for apparent loss. How much water are you losing from people who are taking the water and not being charged? I won't, this is a fairly busy slide, but this is a key that the audit presents. It's called the standard water balance. If you look on the left, it's all of your own sources and water that you produce. It moves from left to right, and as it moves across, you'll see on the top the billed authorized consumption, and then the unbilled authorized consumption, water that you know that you're producing that is being used, whether it's billed or unbilled, gets entered in. Revenue water is in the green, and that's depicted on the far right. Down on the bottom, starting in the red, dark orange, water losses, apparent losses, real losses, all of those things on the right, with your audit will produce numbers. There's a data number that gets put into that, so that gives your customers or your utilities just a one-page look at where their points of improvement really lie relative to their losses. So we do these and provide these audit validations throughout the state, and actually in other states in the country right now, going through these numbers and making sure that they're as good as can be relative to the data available. So this slide is, again, a little difficult to see, but it presents the 4 pillars of apparent loss. You'll see on the top meter accuracy, and then you have data transfer errors and things like that. All the things that I've talked about that kind of lend itself to the overall number for apparent losses. And this is the same slide that does the same thing. The 4 pillars of real losses, obviously you have leaks, pressure management, and so forth. So what we propose to do in this project is to really focus on both of those areas through the water audit, and also conduct a sound, effective leak survey. Again, this is the strategy relative to, it's kind of a triple bottom line that we have here. Once you incorporate all this information, ask yourself all these questions, ultimately it lends to sustainability, and that's the center point of these 3 circles here. So I wanted to talk a little bit, while I still have a few minutes here, about our leak detection and repair program. We will utilize for this program the appropriate acoustic leak equipment. And as you may know, whether you're touching something, as this person is, with a mic on this hydrant, or you're using correlators that attach to, say, sit on top of your valves in your system to measure a certain area of main, it's measuring the acoustics, the sound of that water traveling through that system. If there's a leak, you can hear it. It starts to howl, or maybe if it's a very small leak, it's a different signature of leak that indicating a smaller leak. So what you see there is that the leaks are detectable based on the size of the leak, the pressure of pipe size, pipe material, and so forth. We also use a ProMaps Unity software system that is carried by our technicians that map the entire system that we survey as we go, and enter in any data that we have relative to size of pipe, leaks found, and so forth. that would be a report that we would be able to produce and deliver as a product of this program. Here's some of the tools of the trade, listening devices. The ones that you see to the left are points of touch to the system, whether it be an angle stop, a curb stop, a service line, hydrant. The leak correlator equipment is listed on the right. We've employed this for many years. Say you listen to 500 feet of main in a system, and you can, with this equipment, then pinpoint a leak based on the signature, the acoustic signature that is produced on that computer, to pinpoint a leak within, say, 2 feet. And then again, you listen to confirm that, and then that's where you dig. So you're not digging and excavating unnecessarily. So lastly, why select Emmy Simpson for this job? We bring forward dedicated, seasoned professional utility service providers. And like myself and others in the company, people who have been in water all of their life, whether it's from a utility experience perspective or working their whole life in meter testing and accuracy and doing the specific work that we would do in this program. We have been doing this for a long time. We're successful at it. We deliver upon it. We're experienced. As I said, relative to this particular project and water audits and water audit validation, we're training utilities on that right now. Myself and another in the company are doing these Cal Nevada AWWA trainings as instructors for this. So it's right in our wheelhouse. We're dedicated to the clients that we serve, and as I said, it's a lot about communication and making sure that we work side by side with the representatives that are identified with Indian Wells, and not only that, the representatives from each of the utilities, from the SDACs that we would work with, and really get close to all the customers, the water customers that are in your system. We don't believe that any company such as this, doing a project that impacts people's health and livelihood, which water does. It's not just a utility. It's not telephone. It's not PG&E. Water is something that impacts all of our lives and health. And for those type of projects, we firmly believe that anyone working on that and impacting the customers needs to know the people that are doing that. So we would definitely focus on outreach to make sure that everyone in your communities knew who we were specifically, by name, and with the ability to reach out and get a hold of us while we do this project. And we firmly believe that we would be able to deliver 5-star quality deliverables throughout this whole process using this approach as our guideline. So with that, I'll see if anyone has any questions.
Any questions from the board? Looks like none.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. And our final presenter on this program is a representative from California Rural Water Association.
Top of the day to you. My name is Michael Sims. I'm the lead leak detection training specialist with California Rural Water. And so just to kind of go over a little bit about what we do. There we go. Anyway, California Rural Water has been around since 1990. We have been immersed with the state, and that's what we do best. We provide technical assistance with on-site technical assistance with water and the wastewater side. We tap into all the different expertise and experience that we do with everybody in the state. We govern with the board of directors. We have an administrative staff, technical field staff that work in concert to offer members the expansive range of essential programs that we have to our members. We, again, take that into seeking and assist with the Indian Wells groundwater authorities to propose an assistance with water auditing, leak detection, and repair. Again, California is affiliated with the National Rural Water Association, all 50 states. They are one of the largest water and wastewater utilities in the nation, and we partner with them, and they have over 28,000 working on 29,000 members across the nation. How we can best serve you is basically with the knowledge that we have. We've done lots of stuff here in the Inyo Kern counties throughout this valley. We've also done some medium household income in this area this year, and we've done some pretty good audits in there. I've been doing this since 2008. I've been in the industry for 37 years, and doing leak detection is going on about 12 years now. We have we've developed a great SOP, a standard operating procedure for this. We've been doing this throughout the state. We've been working with Prop 50, Prop 84. We are now in with the Prop 1. I do also Department of Water Resources, along with their ag water leak detection as well. And so we do a multitude of things within the state and provide communities with this type of service. Again, we do critical pinpoint or critical areas where we can do critical leak detection as well as a full leak detection surveys. Basically, we have a technical staff, and we provide all the equipment. I have another chart up here with my Sigma staff. I have 3 leak detection specialists that are in the field now that we do this. We've been doing this, again, we do this every single day. We also have our office assistants, administrative, in the Sacramento offices that provide also information and reporting. I do lots of training. I'm on with boots on in the field with the operators as well as managers and board members. So I'm actually in the field with these guys, and we actually help them and provide training for the water operators as well. On our standard operating procedures, the purpose of this thing is basically to have the known areas of support, because NRW is a known fact. We know that our infrastructure in this nation is probably stuff that is dating back to probably the Civil War era. And there's pipes that are, from all different types. So, to be continued, we do have provide leak detection assistance for disadvantaged communities, as rural water does that the best. We actually build a technical assistance, and we do long-term. I like to work with the water operators as well and get to know them and be in the area to provide that support. I think I already talked about that. And the benefit, we want to minimize leakage in the water system and know that the benefits for the water customers and their suppliers. These are some of the things that the leak detection benefits will include: improve the operating efficiencies, lower water operation cost, reduce potential of contamination, which is a big thing. When you have leaks and you have your wastewater and different lines that are hopefully 10 feet apart, but not only that, sometimes when that sewer lines are leaking and you have a leak in the line, there's a potential contamination for pollution and E. coli. We also want to make sure that we can extend the life of the facilities, reduce potential property damage and wastewater system liability. With that, we have our own insurance company that California Rural Water has, as well as for our membership base. We reduce water outages events, because that's something that is going to be happening, I think, more in the future with power companies, and making sure that when there is a power outage, they have the proper generation, and to make sure that they can go for a long period of time. Also will actually help with improve the public relations. The prerequisite is basically we do have all the state-of-the-art, cutting edge of the equipment out there. I do all the same thing with different types of mappings. We map everything that we touch. I know that some systems don't have maps, so we can actually help provide that. We also do all the things with safety, flagging. We're all certified flaggers, so that can all take as well as all the equipment that we need. And then we also do full worksheet reports. They'll probably be in the PDF from our offices with all the different information from the survey on unaccounted for water loss. And then our responsibility, these are some of the responsibilities that we will be asking, because that's something that we do a lot, is we want to work with the operator. And we want to make sure that the map of the system is available. If they don't, we have a diamond map supplier that can help that water system as well. We know there's many different things out there that need to be taken care of. The main lines, service lines, we know there's many of those. And so with the percent of the water loss that they have, we want to make sure the distribution is taken care of. How they prepare for the water audit findings, we do the Department of Water Resources and the AWWA software as well. And pressure management is probably a big one. We want to make sure that the pressure management, there's lots of great things out there with VFDs, and to make sure that they have the proper pumping. I will send out a prep water system to, as a project manager, to make sure that they have all these things intact before we go out to get the information that we need, and work closely with that and have like a little checklist. And then with the different, the phase one that we'll be looking at, we'll make sure that the wet spots, landscaping areas, water pooling, ground surfacing, noise catch basins, whatever it might be in the area, and where it should be brown, where it's green, the surrounding conditions. Look at the heavy cracking and pavements areas, roots, trees, all the different things, sinkholes, repairs that have been done before to make sure that they, sometimes you go back to the same place. Also on the phase two side of it, this is kind of how we safeguard ourselves. Do not take place. What we basically do is we go out, and I do have loggers. We do logging that we can do overnight for days. We have correlators as well to correlate up to 2,500 feet, depending on the different types of pipe. Certain correlators work on different types of pipe. We have all the different size for non-metallic and metallic, different types of equipment along, and then we validate that with the acoustic sonic mics to validate that the correlation or the loggers is telling us where that information is. But we'll touch everything, making sure, from the hydrants, the valves, curb stops. Usually the curb stops are probably the worst offenders, as well as meters. We know meters are a big thing. We've taken on our preferred provider program, we have a meter company. We have quite a few meter companies, but the biggest one that we support and recommend is Camstruck. They're the ultrasonic meters that actually help with leak detection, tampering, any type of things that go on, and that way you can actually have a nice network with that side of it as well. This is basically just some of the things that we do when it comes to the CPUs on the graphs, all the different correlations that we do along with loggers and the correlators. We want to make sure that this is what is telling us, because sometimes there's phantom leaks, there's things that come up that we might have to go back and do certain things with logging, with the logger side of it. I think I've probably mentioned pretty much all of this already. These are basically just the step-by-step on what we do on everything. You can do manual correlation. I mean, that's something that people can do if they wanted to do that without any equipment, but that's a little bit harder to do. That's the reason why we have the equipment. The reporting side of it, we will use a PDF and we'll survey all the different areas of the water system. We'll complete that project, and then we'll review it. We'll put it through our administration up in Sacramento. They'll take a look at it, and then that gets back to the system as well as the Indian Valley Wells. Job safety is probably a number one thing that we are looking at now because of all the things that are going on in areas when it comes to flagging. But not only that, just all the PPE, everything that we need. Depends on the terrain, the weather, all these things all come into play, making sure that my people and my guys are all protected. Any questions or comments?
Any questions from the board? Hearing none. Is that the? That's it. That's it. Okay. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all three firms for submitting proposals and for coming today to present to the board. Thank you.
All right. Before I move on, are there any comments from the public? Or did we wear you out? Okay. With that, I guess we'll move on to number 6. Is this the residential commercial rebate program?
That's correct. And we had sent out an RFP for that program. We had one response. WaterWise Consultants is here to make a presentation.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to bid and the opportunity to present in front of you. My name is AJ Dewan, president of WaterWise Consulting. I'm here to just talk briefly. Presentation's not too long. Really 3 aspects of what we do specifically for this particular program. I want to talk about our company profile, our experiences, and kind of go into our approach. So we've been in business since 2001, 18 years. We started off with landscape and irrigation training. One of our core services is water audits, so residential, commercial, indoor and outdoor water audits. We are a licensed C27 landscape contractor. History, again, over 18 years, landscaping, horticulture, rebate programs. We've have over 100 years of combined staff experience. We have worked with over 100 municipalities and water agencies throughout California, Arizona, and Washington. As you can see, licenses and certifications, landscape irrigation auditors, qualified water efficient landscapers, which is a QUEL certification. We are D1 certified. We're certified water managers. We're also a certified contractor for DIR, for any DIR reporting that may be necessary. Experiences relative to this scope of work. So we just wrapped up a program for San Diego County Water Authority Sustainable Landscape Rebate Program. We've been working with them since 2012, and that program is a full turnkey program where we manage the entire aspect of their rebate program from start to finish, where it included customer application reviews, doing pre and post inspections, assisting in marketing and outreach events. We also approved and denied customers as the main aspect of the program. Once customers were approved, we issued checks on behalf of the Water Authority, collected W-9s, sent out 1099s. So again, full turnkey approach. And you'll see that with some of these other agencies on the board. Same program that we have right now with the City of Ventura and their turf replacement program. And the point of this is just to show you guys we can handle a full turnkey rebate program as we are intended to with the RFP that's been released. Similar programs that fall into this scope, high efficient toilet distribution and installation programs. We've installed over 65,000 and distributed, including that number, 65,000 high efficient toilets. That started, I believe, in 2007. We've conducted over 10,000 device inspections for agencies. Sometimes we are hired where an agency can handle certain aspects of the program and they need our assistance for other things. For example, pre and post inspections. Sometimes they don't want to issue checks. They want to avoid W-9s, 1099s, customer privacy. So they ask us sometimes just to do certain aspects of it. But we do currently have several contracts where we're doing inspections to go verify that urinals have been installed correctly, evaporative coolers, the same type of devices that are included in this RFP. Also part of our scope, again, 55,000 residential water surveys and 10,000 commercial large landscape surveys. These commercial large landscape surveys would also include, again, indoor and outdoor. That's looking at all water sanitary uses, restrooms, kitchens, laundry facilities, cooling towers, boilers, chillers. So we have a lot of experience with commercial devices and, again, rebate programs as a whole. I want to kind of talk about now the approach. And so in the RFP, it kind of stated where this is generally a rebate program, but there are aspects of an direct install program. So again, our goal is to provide you guys a full turnkey approach. We have staff available in English and Spanish Monday through Friday, available for customers via phone, email, fax, mail, you name it, will be available for these customers to answer their questions. More importantly, help them apply. For example, City of Ventura, as I mentioned on the previous slide, a lot of their customer demographics are elderly customers that aren't too technically sound and need help with paper applications. They send stuff through the mail. They just need assistance sometimes in person where we need to go and verify things. So we're capable of doing all those aspects. You'll see on the third bullet point, this is where we listed in our proposal where we want to create a web portal for customers to apply. I believe in the proposal it stated where it's kind of more of a simplistic website where customers can download applications and fill it out, but we have the capability of doing a more extensive website where not only customers apply, agencies have a login where you can log in and look at the back-end data about what rebates have been processed, what your status is, having customers digitize their forms if they choose to and sign, let's say a W-9 if that's something that they want to do, online. So we have all those capabilities to create this web portal. Again, we're available to assist in marketing, public outreach, anything that you guys need to help promote the program. We want to be there for you. We can, again, part of the process, obviously, approving, denying customers, which is pretty straightforward in this particular program. It's really showing proof that the customers not only installed it, verifying receipts. I'm sure you guys have all shopped at retail stores, and sometimes the challenge is all there is just a SKU. There's no model number, no information, so there does take some time to go validate that the customers are purchasing the correct makes and models of devices. We will also create a make and models list for customers to make sure that they are using high efficient water devices. And as I stated, we're obviously there to issue checks if that's something that'll help speed the process, where basically once we have the rebates amounts ready to go, we will invoice you at the end of the month, and you guys send us a check. We'll issue customers directly their checks, so you guys have less things to worry about. Kind of this second approach, well, it's kind of related, I guess, still to the proposal. It's the direct install. And so we would engage a contractor to do the installation of the devices that were listed in the proposal. And basically this slide is almost a repetitive of the last slide, but the contractor will, we'll make sure that the contractor is doing the installations correctly. We'll go verify by doing pre and post inspections with them, make sure that they're managing their products correctly. And more importantly, I think Jeff kind of mentioned that this is potentially a DWR program with grant money, and if that is the case and it is a direct install program, then one thing to consider or to remember is providing that DIR information so we can make sure that that's being reported correctly. I thought of an optional approach which wasn't really in our proposal. I was kind of thinking about it after the fact, so I kind of wanted to throw this out to you guys now. One option, if budget's an issue, if we are looking at DIR and that's going to be challenging, again, the approach, what you see here is basically the same, but instead of WaterWise, our team and us reaching out to contractors directly underneath us to install it, that we would promote this program as a rebate program for customers to install the devices themselves, but also create a short list of contractors that, let's say, are local contractors or contractors that are willing to travel to to install the devices here, and we would make sure that we would stay on top of those contractors to make sure they have city business licenses, they're up to date on their insurances. So when customers are interested in having something installed on our web portal, we'll have a list of certified contractors, as we'll call them. So that could be a different approach, where my idea is if DIR is going to be an issue, then maybe we could avoid some of that by engaging in this short list of contractors that might be available. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out to you guys as an option, because that is something that I am starting to see in other agencies. We have not done that specifically, but we are contractors as a shortlist contractor for other agencies, so I could see where that approach would make sense for this particular program. Let's see. Just wanted to show you guys a couple of examples. I'm not sure why it got cut off here, but our website is waterwise-consulting.com, and this is, as you can kind of see, there's a highlight on the top tab that says Camarillo programs. We manage a few different programs for the city of Camarillo, and there are two options on here, and they're both direct install programs. And the point is, I just want to show you guys what some of the portals look like, and hopefully if you have a minute of your time at some point later, take a look at our website, click these two different portals. And the point is not just to say, hey, we're installing a toilet and call us. We're giving customers information on that website. So, a lot of times customers are asking about makes and models. They want to see sizes, and we're trying to avoid and minimize the amount of back and forth between customers. So all the relative information will be on the web portal for customers to see about the products. If we're going to do a short list of contractors, their information will be on there. Same thing with the Landscape Efficiency Audit Retrofit Program. What you'll see on there is actually videos of certain products. In that particular program, we're installing smart controllers and high efficient nozzles, and there are videos from the manufacturers that are on there. It really talks about water saving. So again, really trying to educate the customers, not just letting them know that there's a great rebate available or a free program, but really trying to tell the customers why we're doing this. And the other website I wanted to show you, which again kind of got cut off, but it's removeyourturf.com. You'll see it on the top left in that white area. And this is a web portal that we created for a few different agencies. As you'll see, it's City of Ventura, Casitas Municipal Water District, and the City of Santa Paula. And we've managed different rebate programs through this website. And for Santa Paula, Casitas, they're pretty much the same. They're turf removal programs, and again, they're full turnkey programs. For the City of Ventura, we're managing multiple rebate programs and direct install programs there. And on this website, it's a simplistic website where customers, depending on the program, again, can download forms, fill it out by printing a piece of paper and mailing in their applications. Or you can see up top there says, apply for a turf rebate, and it'll take them directly through an online portal to show them how to apply, log in, giving them the status of their rebates, and when they can anticipate their checks being issued. So it's a full step process. And what I like again about our web portals is we're not here just trying to quickly show them a website and click and apply. We're here trying to provide them resources. So if you go to these pages, you would see helpful information on the products that we're providing. You'll also see resources, like there's a tab of resources that are just general water conservation practices that we always encourage our customers, and we're using this information from our surveys to really, again, engage customers about just good habits for water conservation. It's not just, again, providing information about rebates. We want to make sure customers get as much information as possible. And that's it. Questions?
Any questions? All right, hearing none. Are there any questions from the public? Come and state your name. You need to come up to the, since we're recording, Renee.
The name of your company again?
Waterwise Consulting.
Okay.
That was Waterwise Consulting.
All right, thank you. Hearing no further questions, I guess we're done. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
So Jeff, a question is, I guess where we're going to progress with this is whittle this down to some recommendations and cost analysis. I want to ask this question: how critical are these two programs to creating the plan, or are they just something we're offering?
These were included in the grant proposals for two different reasons. One, that portion of the grant program didn't require any reimbursement. And when we submitted the application, we thought the part that was a preparation of the GSP was going to have a local match, and that turned out not to be the case. But it was money, seemed like free money at the time, so we wanted to take advantage to get some actual water savings if there was water available. And the other thing, it was intended to be a pilot program, so we could look at the results and see, is it something that we should put in the GSP that should be expanded based on the experience we have, see if it needed to be modified. So having said that, it's not critical to the GSP. It was an opportunity, and it's not critical to the GSP itself.
Okay, because as usual, I'm concerned about cash flow with these because these programs haven't even started. And I'm not sure how the money would flow, how the rebates would go out and go back, and then how the money would come from DWR. So that's why my question was: are they critical to producing the GSP, or are they just written in the GSP as programs that we are going to highlight, I guess?
Yes, I mean they're really separate from the preparation of the GSP, strictly speaking.
All right.
I mean there's a link, but it's not part of the description and the grant funding for the GSP itself.
And the reason I ask that is how quickly do we need to move on it is what I'm looking at.
Recognizing the cash flow, one of the things we intend to do is talk to DWR about timing, because the funding agreement has certain schedules in it and how much flexibility there might be in that, so we can look at the cash flow and see what we can work with DWR on about when we stage the program.
Because I knew that was a question with the rebates. It's like we would have to pay for whatever's happening and then do the billing for it.
Yep.
Which is an issue. Okay, Thank you. Any other questions from the board before we move on?
Yeah, Ron, this is Bob.
Yes, Bob. Yes.
The water resource manager indicated there were timelines within the agreement with the state and said he was seeking some information from them as to whether they could alter those in any. What is currently the eligible period for the funding? Like, when do we have to, what's the last date by which we could get that state grant money under the agreement?
I don't know that date. We had scheduled these programs earlier in the overall process, so we were going to talk to DWR about how far we could delay it within the schedule we have and an end date issue. And I don't know what it's set at right now in the agreement.
Okay, that's something I would like to know before we move forward, is what's the eligibility period for the money?
We will get that.
John?
And are either of the advisory committees scheduled to review these proposals and could provide their input?
We were going to go to the ad hoc imported water committee that we have for these. We had used them for the evaluation process of RFPs before, and it worked pretty successful. And that way we get representation from both the PAC and the TAC, rather than just going to one of them.
Any other questions? All right, we can move on to discussion and board approval of amendment to the IWVGA Desert Research Institute contract.
Yes, this amendment includes 3 tasks within it. The first one was work that DRI had to do. We had in their contract using a database with TDS data in it and doing a baseline water quality run with TDS. They conducted that run some time ago using a database that was provided by, I believe, the Brackish Water Group. And once we did the run, we started looking at the results. I think we looked at them with the TAC and started seeing things that didn't look quite right. We spent time going back through the database and realized it needed to be scrubbed. It needed to be corrected more than it had been. That resulted in DRI having to, actually Stetson did part of that, but that's not in this addendum. And DRI had to do certain things. They looked at well depths and how to assign data to which well depth based on screens or lack of information. And then they had to rerun the baseline TDS run. That work was done some time ago, and the resulting rerun was much better and made, I think, everybody's fairly satisfied with that to the degree you can be with data. My understanding is that was going to be reimbursed to the Groundwater Authority, but the contract is with DRI, so we need to amend their contract to get them paid on that. The second item is in DRI's contract. We had 4 flow model runs in their contract and 2 TDS model runs. The board had given direction that we had previously run 2 model runs, working with the ad hoc modeling committee and the TAC. Discussed other runs with them, but then went to the board and got direction on 3 runs, which we've conducted. So that brought our total flow runs up to 5, which is 1 more than their contract. We need to cover that work that was done. We anticipate we'll need another run. It may just be a fine-tuning run. We're anticipating we might need that, so that's included in the addendum. DRI had done, as I mentioned, we had 2 TDS runs in their original contract. They did one with the baseline. At the direction of the board, they did another one, their second one, on what we call the white paper run, and we anticipate we'll need one more run. So this addendum includes 2 flow runs, one of which has already been done, and 1 TDS modeling run, which has not been done. And it'll include, running the model, analyzing the information, putting presentations together, interacting with the TAC on those. And the total for that one's $19,000. We suggest there's a third task that we suggest, and it's basically a contingency. We're not through looking at everything that needs to be evaluated. We would like to have the ability to utilize DRI if needed, either additional model runs, additional analysis. They've looked at water quality issues. They have expertise in the isotope work that's being done. They've looked at subsidence in the basin. We have set scopes for that and see a way to complete all of that work at this point, but we'd like to have them available in case, but frankly, it would be in response to direction given by the board if we need to do more. And we propose a budget of $25,000 for that. It would not be used unless directed by the water resource manager, and he would not do that unless he had the agreement of the general manager. We all knew the scope and what the cost was going to be.
So the first task 1, task 2 are basically completed, and we just need to do the addendum. As I understand, task 1 is basically completed.
That's
rerun.
Correct. Yeah, that's correct.
And task 2 are 2 additional model runs that you're expecting to have.
Task 2 is 1 model run that was already completed at the direction of the board, 1 flow model run, 1 additional flow model run in the future that if we believe we'll need, but if we don't, we won't spend the money, and 1 additional TDS model run.
Okay.
So some of this we're just sort of catching up on what we need to do based on the work we've had them do.
Okay. Any questions? Any more questions for the board?
Are these contract amendments directly related to the preparation of the GSP?
Yes, they are.
And are they unbudgeted for amounts?
They are unbudgeted.
Are any of the amounts being reimbursed by?
The first task for $8,235 would be reimbursed by the Brackish Water Group.
But the $19,000 and the potential up to $25,000 are currently unbudgeted for.
The $19,000 is not currently in the budget,
okay,
and the $25,000 is not in the budget. 2 separate items.
Is that $8,000? Is that the total reimbursement from the Brackish Water Project? Were there other reimbursements? I can't recall the amount from the original.
This is the amount reimbursable for DRI's work.
Okay.
I mentioned in the presentation, Stetson actually had to do some work
Right.
scrubbing the database too, and there's agreement
Okay.
on reimbursing Stetson on that.
So the Brackish Water Project will reimburse this DRI model run as well as Stetson's involvement. Okay. Any other questions? Bob, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right. With that, I'll open up to the public for comment.
Good afternoon, Derek Hoffman for Meadowbrook, and I'll be brief. My concern with this is that we're bypassing the TAC on the development of this model run scenario, this additional model run, the flow run, described under Task 2. And just for summary purposes, recall that model scenarios 1 and 2 were vetted by the TAC beforehand. The parameters were presented, it was discussed, input was received from the TAC on what the model scenarios ought to look like. But model scenarios 3, 4, 5, and now 6 on the flow runs have not been vetted by the TAC or the TAC ad hoc committee before being before being presented to the board. And so I just want to state that for the record. It's also a concern of mine that, again, you're bypassing the TAC, which was established to help weigh in on not just the results of the model runs, but what the model runs ought to look like in the first place. And so I guess my question would be, who came up with this proposal? What's the basis for this particular additional model run, which is described as including optimizing pumping locations, providing hydrographs at specific locations? You know, I'd like to know, since I haven't heard any discussion about those parameters in open session here, or at the TAC, or the PAC, I'd like it to be stated, you know, who's come up with these parameters and what's the basis for making this the next model run to be run. Thank you.
Jeff, can you answer that? I mean, you have a TAC ad hoc committee for model runs, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
When the allocation group, of which Derek is a member, reached an impasse, we were unable to join the technical work that was being done by the TAC with the work that was being done by the allocation group. We got stuck at that point. So we came to the board, and the direction for model runs 3, 4, and 5 were directed by the board at that point. We've taken the results back to the TAC and presented them and provided a copy to the PAC, which I believe they discussed. This particular run, we aren't necessarily, it's not particularly bound to any particular run at this time. It's the ability to run, to perform another modeling run. What's described there is that Derek was referring to about optimizing pumping. That's the potential that if it's deemed one of the runs that have already been done is the direction that we want to go, we want to have the ability to use that to optimize the pumping, further refine that. This funding could also be used for a whole nother scenario, and we have not been given any direction on that, so it's not preordained what that model run will be used for, and it might not be used at all. If one of the runs that's been done has been deemed acceptable, we might not need to do another run.
So you're basically saying that tasks 2 and 3, those haven't been directly defined yet.
That's correct.
You're just preparing for what you suspect might be a fine-tuning model run and TDS and such. Okay.
That's correct.
And I would think that that you're going to try to get that through TAC as well, correct, as you refine those model runs?
We certainly will take the results to the TAC. How we proceed will be at the direction of the board about whether we need to do another run. We'll go to the TAC and the ad hoc modeling group. That's the direction of the board.
Thank you. Anything else from the public? Before I bring it back this way.
Don Decker. I would like to emphasize the importance of the TAC and the ad hoc committee that was involved in scenarios 1 and 2. They should still be involved with whatever additional runs would be made. This is not a criticism of Stetson, but I think that if there had been additional TAC involvement, the last 3 runs would have had a somewhat different flavor. To me personally, I don't see that any of those 3 represent a viable scenario for the GSP to be able to take directly. I think they're somewhat incomplete, and that TAC involvement in principle could have added additional support to those runs had it been available. And I realize perfectly that the timeline here is really tight and really short, and there are good reasons why the TAC wasn't involved. But we're missing an opportunity by not having a broader point of view, technical point of view here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? I'll bring it back to the board. Hearing none, I guess what I'll do is see if we have a motion to approve the amendment to the DRI Institute contract. Do I hear a motion?
I'll move it.
I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion from the board before I call for vote?
My only comment is even though the budget isn't in place for this, assuming that the statement's accurate that these are critical for the development of the GSP, I think it's critical to move forward with this type of action.
Thank you. All right, I'll call for a vote.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Director Heyman.
Yes.
Chairman Kaczynski.
Yes.
Director Page.
Yes.
Vice Chair Gleason.
Aye.
Thank you. So I'll move on to the Water Resource Manager report. Do you have Steve on the phone from Mexico? I'm just kidding.
He actually suggested he would call in today. He is on a well-earned vacation, and I told him, don't do that. He needs to, although I think I got an email from him this morning, so he needs to relax. So I will give the General Manager's report. If I could have the first slide. What would I say? General Manager. I'm sorry. Don just slapped me because I said General Manager's report. I meant the Water Resource Manager's report.
You can get my report.
No, that's okay. But first, an update on the Prop 1 status. We've submitted the first invoice for reimbursement and gone through the process of addressing comments and getting it formatted and all the backup in the way that the DWR wants that. They found it acceptable. They're processing the payment. The last we heard, we could expect payment, from any day now could be to the end of the month. We tried to get an update on that yesterday and today, and they are checking to see if our contact can tell exactly where in their check processing process it is, so we can see how close we are. But we don't have an update on that. So we're still anticipating it this week or next week to get the first reimbursement for $335,000. We've also submitted the second draft invoice for $352,000. That's being reviewed. We anticipate probably minor comments since we've gone through the first invoice and gone through the process. We think we've got it down. They've actually indicated to us they think this will be able to be processed much sooner. We know it won't be in the next 2 weeks they issue the check because they can only issue one check a month, but we haven't gotten any commitment to them whether it's going to be next month or when it will be we get the next check. But we will keep in touch with them and update you as we get additional information. And we're working on a third invoice to get submitted. It's going to go to the next item, which is a brief update on the pump fee status. Some of this, I think, is familiar. We've got 52 registered accounts. We've got 23 accounts that we believe to be non-de minimis based on some criteria. Some of them might be, and some of them probably are de minimis, but those are being reviewed. We have received some additional voluntary de minimis registration forms, and the total payments received to date, and this is, I think, as of yesterday or the day before, is $315,900. The forecasts are running, the payments are running under our forecasts, and that's simply because this is basically what we've received from invoices that were sent out through May. So that pumping was during the, all the revenue that's been received was during the low demand periods, and this was a very wet period, so that's why the payments are actually below our forecast at this point. It should start picking up now.
The 23 accounts not registered. I mean, I keep seeing that number there. I mean, what else can we do to, short of knocking on a door?
That's probably where those might be at.
Okay.
And that's not being done at this moment, albeit that will be a topic of discussion, is how to proceed with those.
Because the number doesn't seem to move much.
No.
Okay, thank you.
And that's all I had.
Section A was plan of action and milestones for the POAM?
Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped over that.
Yes, you did.
I understand why, but I didn't mean to. I don't have an update on that. As was stated, the last POAM that was issued was in March. We are behind on that schedule. We need some additional direction from the board. And then we will, I anticipate, shortly be updating the POAM.
What direction do you need?
I think we're going to talk about that in closed session. We've done some modeling runs. We got some feedback from the board. We need to be clear on what direction we are going from there.
Okay.
And then we'll know how to update the POAM.
Thank you. Any more questions from the board for Jeff? Yes, sir.
Thanks, Chairman. I also honed in on the 23 accounts, and you seemed nebulous about the description of them, how many are de minimis, how many non-de minimis. Could you be a little more specific on where we are, when we expect to be all 75 registered, or is that a real goal? Can you be a little more specific on that?
Heather, are you on the line? I obviously, I don't know the details on that. I'm sorry, Director.
Okay. I'm aware that Heather's had some family difficulties, and I'm we all offer our sympathies and encouragement and our understanding of some delays you may be incurring because of the POAM and because of some questions you may be asked today.
Thank you.
So I'm looking forward to, but the accounts registered really wasn't the water resources, more the general manager. I think. Where are we going with that, Don? Do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, it's on our action register, the staff's action register, and what we're holding off on is we're looking for criteria to look at individual properties, and that's been tasked to Stetson to provide that. And again, until we get that, Water District had offered our staff to take the checklist that's developed, if you will, a checklist or a template, and go out and evaluate the properties and just get some idea of whether or not, from a visual inspection, if it appears that they're de minimis or not.
So let me ask you just a hypothetical. If some of those 23 are non-de minimis, and they're pumping in excess of 2 acre-feet, and they're not paying for their fair share of that pumping fee, what's our action? What are we proposing to do? Or do we have a plan yet?
It's going to be, it's very, I don't know if this is an objective decision, it's kind of subjective. You're looking at their landscaping, what potentially using the water for, then trying to determine whether or not that looks like it's going to exceed the 2 acre-feet per year limit. So there's a lot of, I don't know there's very objective, it's more a subjective decision.
I also think, tell me if I'm wrong, that the difference we'll discover, I mean, there's not much there to be gained from spending a lot of dollars to answer that question, because the gain in the pumping fee would be minimal. Is that correct?
I mean, unless it's very obvious that they're exceeding that 2 acre-feet per year limit, I think you're right. Trying to chase that down and get that additional fee. I mean, we're getting fees from municipals and co-ops that are in terms of less than $10. So to direct a lot of staff time and resources to try and chase down what's potentially less than $10 is I don't know if that's a good use of our resources at this time.
Yep.
Any other questions? Nothing? All right. We'll move up to one of my favorite, update on the finances. I'm sorry. Does the public have any comment for the Water Resource Manager reports? Thanks, Jim. All right. Hearing none, we'll move on then. Finances.
Okay, the financial report is in your packet, and it has been updated for May, in particular with the format that we're using now. The individual tasks on the POEM are listed with the updated expenses through May. I do want to kind of give you an overview of the financial picture, since we've been talking about cash flow quite a bit in this meeting. If you look at the bottom of the report, we have unpaid invoices totaling $463,807.57. And you can see on the account what's in our ending balance is $45,697. So we're a magnitude of 10 off on our invoices. But just to give you a little bit of reassurance, and Jeff's report provided some of that. I did have a different number for what the DWR reimbursable is for the first invoice that we submitted. I'm not sure what the discrepancy is. It's about $31. But based on the numbers I had, the DWR reimbursable that's already been submitted, that should be coming through at any time, as we said, and we tried to reach out to DWR to check on where they anticipate that payment is. That gives us $335,631.42. Again, a little bit off of Jeff's number. With the current balance of $45,697, that gives us a balance available of $381,328.42, which will allow us to pay all those unpaid invoices that you see, with the exception of the most recent Stetson invoice of $104,000, roughly $105,000, and leave a balance of about leave a balance of about $22,235 in the account. And keep in mind, we have collected the pumping fees for May. And what we are doing is collecting those fees through the month, and at the end of the month, we sweep that into the county account in which the payments are made. So the May pumping fees have not been swept over into that balance yet.
Okay.
So the financial picture I'm trying to present to you will look better once we get that check from DWR, which we're hoping we get at any time. You've already authorized payment of those invoices, so as soon as we get that check, we'll pay all but that last Stetson invoice. And also, as Jeff pointed out, we're looking at the second invoice has been submitted. The third invoice, I had communicated with Heather. She said it should be on the order of about $160,000. Whether or not that changes, I don't know. But at the time I communicated with her, that was the amount it was looking like. So I think our financial picture is looking a little better than it looks based on these numbers here. I do want to point out, too, that we do intend to bring a more complete, updated cash flow projection to the board, a longer-term one, in July. The reason we didn't do it today, we've been working on the budgets for the water district, the general expense and the capital budgets, and those were approved at our board meeting this month. So that frees up staff time to work on this. So we'll bring that long-term, more updated cash flow to the board in July.
You said there are no May pumping fees in here at all?
No, this does not reflect the May pumping fees, and I can tell you as of last night.
Yeah.
Now, this as of last night, there was $38,056.11 collected, but we have received a couple more this morning that I didn't have time to add to this, and they were from a couple of the more major pumpers. So I don't know what that number will be, but that is not included in the numbers you see here.
Okay. And you also answered my question already about the long-term cash flow. I know what you guys have been doing over there and getting through to that, but that'll be very valuable to us. And I know that's next on your agenda to
Right.
get done. Okay,
Right.
Thank you. John, I know you have something.
Back in January, I had some questions about some invoices about that particular question was about the brackish water cost for the DRA invoice. And I believe Supervisor Gleason chimed in on that and asked for an agenda item that would really dive deep into the finances of this authority. I think he even suggested maybe we spend an hour before the regular meetings start. And we've had these financial updates on the agenda ever since, so thank you for that. My question is if, given our, even in the best case scenario, we still have a cash flow problem at the end of the day, given that, and given our expected directions that we will be giving to Stetson moving forward with changing the poem, will we then be able to identify tasks on this financial report that are no longer essential, in our opinion, to the development of the GSP and maybe subject to budget modifications at that point?
If I get your question, I think the answer is yes. I mean, this is a living document, if you will, the report. So if there's additional tasks added, as you can see on there, there are expenses that are unfunded that are added to the report. So if direction changes, there's another task added, we'll add that in there and show it as perhaps unbudgeted originally, but what that expense is and adjust it. Does that answer your question?
Well, I'm not sure it did. I think my question was, will we be able to eliminate line item costs here that we, through development of direction and development of the GSP, are able to determine that are no longer essential to the development of the GSP and maybe are something that we do not need to expend money on?
Okay, I think we would leave them on the report, but maybe put a footnote or something to indicate that it's no longer an active task. I think we would show originally that it was a task with a budget, but there's nothing expended on it.
Yeah, seems like that, in my opinion, would be a prudent thing to do if we're able to make those determinations and address the budget issues that this agency has.
Yeah, I would think it would be desirable to still show the task as originally intended, but show that there's no more money being spent on it and note that as a footnote.
Sure.
Let me try to understand, John, what you're asking is that, let's say there's a line item that is on the POAM that's part of the what we sent to DWR for the grant, that if that isn't used there, can it be used somewhere else? Is that what you're asking? Can it be moved from one task to another if we're not doing that task?
Well, I don't want to conflate issues with grant reimbursement in our budget.
Right.
But my question is asking if we are able to identify tasks on this financial report that aren't directly essential to the development of the GSP at this time.
Right.
Can we start to remove those items from our expected budget so that we can get our financial house a little more in line with our revenues? That's my question. That's my hope.
Okay. I'm trying to understand what that will do, but I'll digest that as we go and see what that'll happen. Yes? No. No comment? Okay. Anything else from the board or questions?
Can I just offer
Please.
my thoughts on it? I philosophically, I very much enjoy your thinking and what you want to do. We want to be able to shift, and we want to be able to move, and we be able to redefine critical path to successes, and we have to constantly do that. How we administer that and how that reflects on an actual spreadsheet. I'm not an accountant. I wouldn't know how to do that. I wouldn't know how to recommend that. But the philosophy of being able to change gears and reprioritize or reshift resources to accommodate critical successes has to be a part of how we operate for the next 30 years or 50, 100 years. So I appreciate the question. I like that type of thinking. I don't know how we implement that on a spreadsheet. I'll leave that up to the accountants in the room.
I believe this spreadsheet was based on the POAM. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
And then there were added things that weren't on the POAM that are additional costs that we've incurred. So right now everything you see is the way the POAM is created, which is the way I believe the grant was created as well. So everything sort of matches that. But I agree with you that we need to be able to move things around. But that's an accounting thing, and as far as I'm concerned. A couple of things that come to mind. I'm not sure it's on track or not, but I was glanced at one of the invoices from DRI, and Jeff, I think you can answer this. I see one of the highest costs is their environmental scientist for the model runs. That one sort of stands out with me, that when we're talking about budgeting money and such, that when you see invoices from DRI, in fact, it's the only time I've seen environmental scientists, which are the bulk of some of these invoices. Can you explain, is that just a title that I'm misunderstanding, or the use in the model? Because they have subject matter and analysts and things like that on here.
Yes, I think, and that's a matter of titles within DRI. I mean, one of the people who does substantial work on this, that happens to be their title. They're not specifically working on environmental. We don't have that big of an environmental element.
That's why I was wondering what because I see the bulk of the hours for it is the environmental science. And the other thing that, and I think John mentioned this, and we started talking about well intel and that additional $2,000 a year, was it, I think, to continue with the monitoring of these wells?
12 plus 2 a year. 12 to start.
Well, 12, as I understand it, 12 was the initial investment, and now we're just data gathering. It's $2,000 a year.
We had a free trial.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm missing something. I don't think the 12 was spent, but I might just be misremembering.
Okay, yeah, maybe I need refreshing on that. I thought that the board approved the initial installation of the 12,000, and then to continue the monitoring would be so much per year.
No, the 12,000 hasn't been paid.
I know, but that's the initial cost, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
That we agreed upon for the trial.
Right.
And that includes a 60-day free of monitoring. And then continuing monitoring is about how much per year?
2,000.
Okay. So the money's already been approved and spent for the installation of the 10. Well, it hasn't.
Free trial.
No.
No, that money hasn't been approved and spent. That was
okay.
What
That was
the
just a
item
free
agenda
trial.
was for today.
Okay, and the question is if that we continue with this. All right. That's
or
what I needed.
Pay
Thank
for
you.
the
right.
setup fee.
Any more from the board?
Yeah. I had also, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Real quick, I'd also written down the hour previous for the Finance Committee to meet, and we hadn't done that, and I was thinking that it might be a good time with the gears that are shifting here in July, that we have scheduled some time for our board meeting, maybe before our opening board normally meets at 10, to maybe come in at 9 and sit down with the board, just review of a sharp focus on finances, where we are and how things are moving in what direction. So I'd like to make a recommendation that we put that in the next, a reference to, or a referral to the general manager to include that in the next board package. Thanks.
I would think that, I mean, it's not a bad idea to meet a half hour early and cover nothing but finances, but couldn't we just cover that in the finance section like we're doing right now, except a lot more time for a presentation and whatever we're doing? Or do you just want a specifically pre-board meeting? Because that gets touchy.
Well, right. I would just like to have a dedicated time, whatever that is, allocated any way you want it, but it's just going to be finances and a deep dive on where we are with cash flow and all those other issues.
I would think that would be under the finance continuing agenda item. Maybe just a longer discussion, but I don't anticipate a full hour, at least in presenting the cash flow, unless, I mean, the board has a lot of questions and wants to drill down into it into detail, but I just think we have an extended finance report on the agenda, and we'll cover that.
And I believe once he gets basically what we're asking is for a long-term look at everything that's going to cost us through the approval and submittal of the GSP, including some months afterwards before all the money comes in. In other words, how much we're going to spend, how much we're going to pay, and how long are we going to be on these pumping fees to pay for the GSP. And then further from that now, we're going to move on down the line about operation costs.
Right.
That's what I'm hoping.
Right, yeah. Like, for example, we have in the poem TAC and PAC coordination line item for Stetson, and we're, I think, over $100,000 over budget for something like that. So a discussion of what's going on there, what we should actually expect in the future, and how that relates to fees and how we move forward is what's on my mind.
Okay, thank you. Bob, before I move it to the public, do you have anything?
No, I have no other questions right now.
Okay, thank you. If nothing else, I'll open up for the public.
Don Decker. I want to make an observation here that the POAM was largely constructed around the chapters that are actually specifically being required to assemble the GSP, which in turn came from DWR direction. So although there obviously is some flexibility, much of what's there is actually in direct response to the DWP GSP requirements. So the flexibility that one would hope could be there is pretty limited. It's already been scrubbed in a sense in the creation of the proposal in the first place. I did make some suggestions myself personally as a TAC member some time ago that could result in some cost savings, that some of which have already been incorporated. And I have some other suggestions that could be followed up too, and I'm sure others do too. But basically, I think we have what we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from the public? Anything else from the board before we move on? All right, we'll move on to...
Ron, this...
Okay, Bob.
It's Bob. Sorry. Hey, I just remembered something that... one thing I had mentioned before when I was on the board was that when we get an agenda item that asks us to approve a new contract or some new work, that I would appreciate that the agenda item from the staff, the description and the recommendation, were to include a mention about whether or not the work that we're being asked to approve is included in the budget or not. And I'm still not seeing that happening. For example, today, the DRI contract amendment, we never even actually got a staff report on that, a written staff report included in the budget packet for that. We got a copy of the budget amendment, the contract amendment a day or so ago, but we never got an agenda item from the staff. I'd really appreciate that kind of information when the board agenda packet comes out, that if we're being asked to approve new work or approve a contract that was expected, then the agenda item should indicate whether it's in the budget or not.
I agree with you on that. Thank you. Anything else before we move on? All right. We're going to outreach efforts.
Just an update on the postcard that went out for voluntary well registration among private well owners. Again, just to repeat, we were using the original list of over 16,600 addresses that were used to send out the postcard informing, I should say, not promoting, the Groundwater Authority, letting people know what committees are formed, when they meet, where they meet, and such. We tried to pare that list down to potential private well owners. In doing so, there were some challenges. The first thing to do, obviously, would have been remove what would be water district customers. But we were made aware of at the PAC meeting earlier this month that some well owners that are within our service area or on streets that are close to our service area, and filtering out those addresses down to 2,711, something like that, those addresses were pulled out. So the reality is there are some private well owners who did not receive a postcard. I don't know, in retrospect, what we could have done. Our staff spent several hours over several days trying to bring that list down to what we thought was a manageable list of possible private well owners. Obviously, we missed some, but the cards did go out, 2,700 people, and I believe as of this morning, although our office has fielded some phone calls and questions, we have not received any of the forms.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, how responsive it's been for that, and how many forms have been even picked up. Probably not many. So
yeah, I think it's been out, about 3 weeks, I think.
Something
like that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Anything else on outreach?
Yes, sir.
Please.
Sorry, I do. Thanks. I appreciate the efforts we're going through to get people to register their wells, and we've initiated a voluntary effort to bring people in. And I think we're reaching a point where we need to mandate that all wells in the Indian Wells Valley get registered. The purpose of this, it's going to take several months to do this. It's not going to be an easy chore. It's 3, 4, 5, 6 months to get everybody registered or to implement a design which specifically mandates people to register their wells. The purpose being, of course, that twofold, really. One is that we need to know the locations of wells. We need to know where people's wells are so we can manage their health and we can manage their impact in our plan and how we are managing each locale of the overdraft and how each one is playing out. We also have to understand that when the GSP is completed, that the pumping fee expires when the GSP is paid for. And I don't know the details of how the terminal that goes, but we also have fees to sustain our behavior our actions as a GSA, and we need an administrative fee. And we need to make sure as we pay that fee that it's not just the water district paying it, it is everybody in the basin who uses water needs to help pay their fair share of that fee. In order to get to that point, we're going to need to start, perhaps next month, a reading of ordinances or something that's going to enable us to begin the process of assigning, of developing that effort. And in order to do that, the first thing is a roll call of getting all wells registered. So I'd like to make that referral and as part of our public outreach.
I guess what you're saying, you're asking staff to proceed to find a way to move ahead with that, yes. Both staff and legal. All right, thank you. I don't disagree with that. I agree. We need to do something. We've tried many efforts in getting people to register their wells and come forward and work with us. And I agree with you, Mick. We're getting to that point where we need to start getting some more information on the books and how we're going to handle that, because there are other things coming forward after the GSP has been completed and paid for. Thank you. Any other comments from the board on Mick's comment?
I would tend to agree. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Anything else on outreach? Okay, hearing nothing, I'll open it to the public.
Don Decker again. The postcard mailing was certainly I think a really good starting point with a real outreach to the rural community. Don Zadiba mentioned that there were some discrepancies discovered somewhat belatedly, and in the mailing list, we are in contact with a fair fraction of the domestic well owners that are in this valley, and the number of folks that did not get a postcard, I think, is way larger than we would have anticipated. Something else has happened. It may be the post office in Inaccuracies is the problem, which a lot of people have discovered with their post office boxes there. The use of the Ace Hardware and Inaccuracies as a distribution point, I took about 24 postcards there a week some ago, and they disappeared off of the counter in a day, and they were taken by people that had not seen it before. How many additional postcards were printed, Don, if I might ask that could be available for further distribution?
I have to defer to Lauren because she has the...
All right.
Do you have an idea roughly how many we still have left? Just what's out on the table? What, a couple hundred maybe? Or maybe 200?
Well, I'm just wondering if it isn't worthwhile to proceed with basically a handout. Herb's store in Ace Hardware is the equivalent of the old general store for the rural community, and everybody that's on North Brown Road and on into town shops there regularly and has a social interaction there. And the staff is perfectly aware of the postcard. Many of them, in fact, of the people I've talked to, I have not actually gotten a firm confirmation that out of maybe 3 dozen that anybody actually got the postcard. They confused the present postcard we're talking about with the earlier postcard that was sent out that also was addressed to the de minimis well owners. And so it's a little bit confusing as to how many really did get this current postcard, but I just stated what I just did discover. So maybe today I'll pick up some additional postcards from you guys, and we can see if we can't extend the distribution a little bit.
That sounds like a very effective way of getting those distributed. They're not doing any good sitting in our office. So
yeah, that's the whole idea.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that suggestion.
Thank you.
Judy Decker, I'd like to make some comments about Mick Gleason's last statement. The people that I have talked to, they don't consider you a real governing entity. And what you mentioned, Mick, is you're getting down to, out of the introduction, into the hard part of creating yourselves as a governing entity. And how you deal with that situation, I can't answer that for you. But people see you, they don't understand the JPA that was formed. And they look at you and they say, well, Ron, you're on the water board, and Mick, you're on the board of supervisors. What's the deal here? And I think you're going to have to come up with a way of communicating to the public at large, but especially to the rural community that is probably not watching this, probably doesn't get either one of the newspapers. It's a difficult situation that you have. And I just wanted to point it out to you that this is what I'm hearing. So take it for what it's worth, but there it is.
Thank you. Any other comments on outreach from the public, the board? All right, we'll move on to board questions regarding Policy Advisory Committee and Technical Advisory Committee reports. I'll start with something briefly. First of all, I read the PAC Ad Hoc Committee on Shallow Well Mitigation recommendations, and I think it's well done. I want to thank the Ad Hoc Committee. I have some questions on it and such. I believe that the questions that I have is I don't know that we're actually or how we're going to pay for mitigation. And I know there's a lot of words like we will pay and we will do this and we will do this, but correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that we're going to attempt to find if there's money available to work on mitigation, or if it's some kind of fund we need to put together. I don't know it's a will yet or an absolute, but we do need to know what's going on with them. And that was in that report. And but otherwise, besides that, I thought the report was well written. It looked at all the options and things that we need to continue to work on, and I'm sure that the PAC will. But one thing that I found out that looking at mitigation of wells affected is a big issue. Everything from when they became affected, is it what happened pre-Sigma, then post-Sigma, and did the GA produce a plan which is going to prevent any more problems with wells? So I think this is a good start, and I think we need to keep our eye on the ball here. And I surely appreciate this, no doubt about it. And from that, I want to ask Dave. I read through your minutes or your report, and I guess what I want to ask is that. Do you have any questions, direct questions for the board Because I see some things on here that looks like you might.
I have. Is this on? Yeah. I have one comment on the shallow well mitigation plan before I answer the one thing I did want to highlight on the PAC report. But first, on the shallow well mitigation plan and the use of the word will, those were the thoughts of the ad hoc subcommittee that the Groundwater Authority is charged with the responsibility to help get and achieve sustainability in the valley. And that to the degree that we can show or document, as you pointed out, the difficulty that some shallow wells, in fact, went dry or water quality not usable anymore based on continued drawdown at some level based on a qualified set of criteria, that agency should take on the responsibility of mitigating for those ones that are documented to be in that case, providing some mitigation for that. And it could be grants, it could also be fees, it could be impact fees across the whole valley or from general locations where higher pumping is. Those are all the options to be considered. Largely we would hope that they could be covered by grants, and this is going to be a statewide issue, and we're one of the ones leading the way on this. And hopefully a lot of it could be grants, but some of it may not to be. But this was a recommendation from the committee that responsibility be borne by the Groundwater Authority as a new emerging government agency. And that's for you to consider. Anything we come up with is a recommendation. Regarding the PAC report itself, there's one thing I wanted to highlight, and it's come up in the discussion today at the top of the second page, the first paragraph. And unfortunately, there was a glitch in the a bug in the software transferring them through, and the first sentence shouldn't have a time in it. That's meant to say that given the TAC and the PAC meetings are 7 days from today, there is an opportunity for you as a board. In your closed session, we assume that there's going to be some deliberation about, is there another scenario, exactly what should it look like, or we would like to throw into the conversation, maybe put a framework around that, and since our meetings are just 1 week away, let the TAC and the PAC review these next week in front of the public. You have 7 days at which to give a final recommendation on what scenario we should run with your guidance. And there's an opportunity there, and the PAC was agreed that was the way we wanted to recommend that the board proceed with this, recognizing, as was also pointed out today, we are behind schedule. We have to get something done. We have a lot of information from the baseline and 5 scenarios, but we haven't put together yet what the final one might be. So we suspect there's going to be one more, and you authorized the funding for that should that happen today in item 7. And we'd like to offer our input and an opportunity for the public also to weigh on that, to inform that.
Thank you. Any other questions for the PAC or comments?
A quick question on the shallow well mitigation. So prior to the Sigma and the GSP, or the GA formation, people took care of their wells on their own, and so once we reach a GSP and a sustainability plan is in order or in function, does that cease the mitigation involvement from the GA?
Well, in one way, you could say that under what the policy that we brought forward is that that's when you do assume responsibility for wells that go dry and can be proven under criteria. Maybe.
Yeah, that's a legal issue that we haven't.
Oh, I understand that. Our recommendation was that's when it would actually begin. And you notice there was a separate question that came from the board to us about what about wells that went dry before the GA was formed, and actually before the GSP went into place. Do you have an equal responsibility in that? These are policy recommendations. We realize there are legal implications. The word will wasn't used to indicate will be grants. It was, we would hope that the board would be able to do that and think about an impact structure that continued pumping in the valley at some level would mitigate the negative effects, because it's pretty well documented and accepted. It's been briefed in the TAC. It's been briefed here that we have 91 wells already in the valley that meet the criteria to say that they've been impacted by lowering water levels. And the last 3 model runs show a large number of wells continuing to be impacted depending on which scenario. And they go down 3, 4, and 5. They go down with each scenario in terms of how many are impacted. So some level of responsibility and a consideration for that pumping is what was recommended. Does that help?
I know as a small community that we always strive to support and help each other. There's no doubt about that. We need to. But I agree with one thing I think Director Gleason said is I would like to know from the legal standpoint of SGMA what our responsibility legally is.
I agree.
Yeah, and then weigh that against what we feel our responsibility is as a community, because I think it's very important that we understand, because I got back from that summit with a lot of GAs, and one thing that was made fairly clear, many of them were not considering mitigation an issue, even though they had some problems, because they felt that wasn't in the purview of what was required by SGMA. That's not to say they're not going to do it, but I would like to know legally what is our responsibility as a GA to mitigate those issues, and at what point. I'm sure that's going to be worked on. But
well,
you're
absolutely,
right.
That's another part of the equation.
Yeah.
You got a policy recommendation for consideration,
right? And
it needs to be vetted against all the other considerations.
Okay. And the last thing I have here is managed growth policy considerations. I've learned some when it comes to growth management. I think I stand by what I said last time. That's up to the city general plan. That's up to the county general plan. We need to make sure that those take into account what's happening with SGMA in our valley, obviously with growth requirements. And I'm not sure. And again, I'm not sure what the authority would be for the GA to implement any kind of growth policies.
Well, that's exactly the discussion that we're going to have next time.
Okay.
Lorelei Oviatt, representing all the planning agencies within the 5 of you up there, volunteered to draft a document that is it's actually going in for approval this afternoon from you all for this conversation, that helps clarify what are the authorities that the GA has and doesn't have, because 90% of the authorities, and I just pulled that out of the air, that we're talking about that can control or put some limits on growth or manage it in any way are actually functions of your independent agencies, not you and this board. You have a very limited amount of direct authorities you can do to manage growth. And so she's going to present that document and guide the conversation about what is within the scope of it, so that we can talk about what this committee can do. I would point out that there was a very interesting statewide information cast by a famed hydrogeologist yesterday, Dr. Jeffrey Mount, that you hosted in the Water District boardroom that PAC and TAC members and the board members were invited to. And they focused a lot on the San Joaquin Valley and the difficulties over there, which in many ways are much more difficult than ours. But this subject came up related to the number. In his estimation, he talks to the governor, he talks to the legislature on these. He's a senior consultant. His estimate of the number one problem that was going to be dealt with in the San Joaquin and most of California was getting all the folks with those authorities to talk together and to be able to coordinate. And in the case of the San Joaquin Valley, there are multiple GAs, and many of them don't have the people on the GA who individually do have the authorities back through their boards. So one thing that we noted positively yesterday in that is, as bad as our situation is, we formed a new agency, a GSA, named the IWVGA, that in fact has the 5 entities that by themselves, not under the GA, but by themselves, actually sit on this board, can help develop those policies that are within the scope of this board, and then inform their own groups so that perhaps we have that opportunity to coordinate better against that number one challenge that this expert said the state of California was facing in getting sustainable. Just an observation, but it relates to this.
I just want to be very careful that the message we send is managed growth. Because if we get a message out there contrary to accepting some form of growth which is controlled, that worries me. And so as all these conversations and these discussions take place, I don't want to send a message that don't come to Ridgecrest.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know I share that.
Yes.
And that's why it's actually good to put out what are the limitations of this group,
Okay.
what are the considerations, and what can you take back to your individual agencies, and how can we work this within your scope, and we will make policy recommendations based on your scope. We can't make recommendations based on what your individual agencies that you represent do, but just what this groundwater authority is responsible and has authority to do. And that's what Lorelei is going to help us with.
All right. Before I open the public, unless there's some more questions for the PAC committee, we'll go on to the TAC. Is there any questions for the TAC or any comments or direction that you need from this board?
Would you like for me to answer that right now?
Yes, please do.
Okay. I will indicate the same thing that Dave has also talked about. All the members of the TAC have both talked to each other. We do feel a bit unused. The meeting that happened this month was the shortest meeting that we've ever had, less than 2.5 hours. And we are here waiting to get the opportunity to provide all the information needed on all the modeling, all of the technical information that is needed to get our GSP items put together properly and in time. And I am going to agree with the items that, information that Dave has mentioned. Members of the TAC themselves commented on these. You can read those and see those within the report. I agree with those. We are here and available to assist and give what is needed. The modeling scenarios that will be coming, we would like to have the opportunity on all the scenarios to discuss those and present that information that we feel is appropriate, that will assist, because the models are simply assisting in putting together our GSP. It's not a control factor at all, but we want to give the technical advisory on how to best use the models to put our GSP items together, and that is moving very quickly. And we are fully available to give 4.5 to 5 hours, whatever is needed from the technical side, because we've done that before. And all of those that have come to the meetings and sat and listened and were fully agreeable and had a good, fun time on the technical side, because we encourage that. But we are here to provide that for you as needed as we get our GSP put together.
And I agree with you. My point is taken, and I will assign the water manager, make sure their meetings are at least 6 hours now, would you please? And, and they have all the technical data that they need.
And Stetson is very much aware
Yes.
of our conversations. We've had good talks with them back and forth, and they did indicate that, yes, things were placed on a bit of hold for the modeling side, but there are other technical things that are going on, data gap issues, the shallow well issues, all of these things. This is a lot of important items that need to be addressed and looked at from both the policy and the technical side, and we are all, from the technical side, ready to assist in that nature. Gene has done some wonderful work with DRI, with all of Stetson involved. Yes, there are things that have been occurring, and we, of course, give our thoughts towards Heather if anything is I just don't know about. But we do give that to her. She has done a ton of work for us in putting together all of the items that we do discuss within our agendas and so forth. And we have a week's time out. I would like to get the information that we can to have an agenda ready to go by Friday if we can, and then get that sent out by Monday, because we only have a few more days after that for any information that's given to the TAC and the PAC members to look at. We would love to get that as soon as we can and be ready for the presentation and discussion of all these items at the meetings next Thursday.
I'm going to ask one question. I'll put you on the spot real quick between water manager and you. How close are we to identifying to sustainability parameters, the exact sustainability parameters. Are we there yet? Close? Where are we?
We need additional direction from the board on any potential
Okay.
modeling and,
All right.
on where to go with that, and then
All right.
the sustainability flows.
That's my only question for that.
Can I foot stomp one thing Adam said? We need to submit our draft agendas this afternoon, essentially, to get this going so Lauren can get them out and any information. So we would sure, if you decide to go down this path, we would sure appreciate hearing out a closed session quickly to align our agendas.
And I'm sure the water manager will make sure that you know what will be going on your agendas.
Or perhaps Friday by noon.
And we'll call Steve in Mexico and have him put that agenda together for you.
Friday by noon, but it's got to be reviewed by staff.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yes, it does.
That's what I'm saying. We need to submit this afternoon in order to get staff time to review, and then Lauren send them out Friday at noon or 2 is what you said when we talked. Okay.
All right. Anything else from the board? Any questions or comments for the Packard attack? If not, I'll open up to the public.
Judy Decker. I was on the ad hoc committee that put this document together, and it is out of the committee meetings we had on that the issue of growth came up, because there are certain facts of life. And one of the facts of life is you have to have water. And if you don't have it, how are you going to grow? The issue that came up at the ad hoc meeting was not the issue of growth itself. The issue was what can be done to ensure that people who come in and buy a new piece of property, maybe with or without a dwelling, have water, and how can we get, as I brought up to you before, you represent different agencies. And your agencies are, in fact, for growth. So how are you going to take this back to your various boards to deal with the issue of growth and water in this valley? As of yet, we do not have one drop of outside water. So I wanted you to be aware of it. At this point in time, I don't want the issue of growth to get blown out of proportion from what was discussed at our meetings. We had 2 or 3. I also want to point out to you that the issue of mitigation was originally written with the words shall. And the 2 people that were on that committee that represent agriculture wanted it to be the first on the list, and they wanted the shall to be changed to will. And I believe that agriculture has been negatively represented a lot, and it doesn't matter whether I'm for it or against it. I want you to know their position on that document was they wanted will, and they also knew they would be paying. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments? All right. With that, we'll move on to the general manager's report.
Okay, the first item is the project update by Capital Core Group, and that is in your packet, and I know that the board receives that. I don't know that the members from the public that are here have seen it, so if it's the board's desire, I could give an overview of that report rather than just accept it.
Yeah, I think we need to accept the reports in the file. I don't recall, I've got everything from May 8th through the last report in front of me, and I just reread them all to get everything in order. And did we receive, is this their first official report?
No, this is the second update. I gave an update last month.
Okay, so we're just asking to receive that in the file, correct?
Well, I was asking, I don't know that the members of the public here are aware of the progress that's been made. You've had it, it's in the packet, so you've seen it, but would you like me to go over it for the benefit of the public?
Can you briefly, sort of as brief as possible, because it has some good information in it, and I have some questions.
Okay, this is for the project of update as of May. It was filed June 12th. With regards to Task 1, which is determination and secure sources of imported water supplies, Capital Accord Group has provided this board with a preliminary and partial draft technical memorandum, which is subtask B of Task 1, outlining potential imported water supplies. To develop that memorandum, they met with various water agencies, water banks, and districts in order to provide the Groundwater Authority with a comprehensive picture of potential imported water supplies, water banking options, and delivery methodologies. Throughout the month of May, they met with 8 water agencies, representatives of 3 water banks, and 2 transfer partners regarding the basin's water, storage, and wheeling transfer needs. The details of this meetings will either be included in the final technical memorandum, which they will produce in July, end of July, or they've been provided in the addendum to the project monthly report provided to the board. These various entities have both water resources and banking capacity available now and over the short term that the board can consider. Their current draft of the technical memorandum provides details of what potential water transactions are available, including potential pricing and structure. They're currently on schedule to provide the GA with the final draft of the technical memorandum as committed on July 31st of this year. As far as Task 3, identifying secure funding sources, preparation of the strategic funding plan, which is Task 3, Subtask B, continues. They conducted further discussion with Senator Grove's office and Assemblymember Fong's staff about the project and potential funding requests. They have met with Congressman Paul Cook's staff regarding the project and applicable potential federal funding options. Capital Corps staff has begun conducting research at the state and federal level. Federal funding research includes programmatic priorities contained within the current Energy and Water Development Act, environmental and related agencies, and interior and related agencies bills. In addition, research went into current water authorization vehicles occurred during the course of May. Qualified program areas have been preliminarily discussed with the EPA and Department of Interior staff. Finally, they met with the National Industry Association leadership to identify their legislative priorities and discuss potential opportunities for authorization amendments. As the second item on my report is specifically a Bureau of Reclamation Water Smart grant opportunity, which Jeff Simonetti is here to answer questions not only on this report, but to give a little presentation about that grant opportunity. It could potentially help provide some funding for Tasks 1 and 2 on their project scope. The critical thing is that there's a short deadline to get that in. I think it's July 31st of this year. So after Jeff makes his presentation, if the board gives direction to go forward with it, they're prepared to move and get this done quickly. Finally, Task 4 board and staff meetings. Jeff was here at the last meeting. He is here again today. They only attend on an as-needed basis. Michael McKinney was prepared to discuss the grant opportunity, but we talked amongst ourselves and decided that Jeff could present that and save Michael's travel coming here. So they're always available by telephone if we have questions. I've been in communication with them. Questions have been provided to me by email from some of the board members. I've addressed them with Capital Corps Group and responded to them. So that's sort of just to the report. As I said, Mr. Simonetti is here to answer any questions you have and also to make the presentation on the Bureau of Reclamation Water Smart grant opportunity.
Turns out most of the questions I have are about those agencies, representatives, water banks, and transfer partners, which are, at this present time, are confidential because that's information that things that are working on. But I do want to be sure that Jeff, you correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to end up with some sort of a spreadsheet showing us details of what's available, how much, because what I'm hoping to come out of this with is I don't think we can ever pinpoint the exact cost of water for us at a particular time. But I think that for future operations of this organization, we're going to need to know how we're going to budget. Is it going to be $1,000 per acre foot? Is it going to be $500 per acre foot? I know it depends on the timing and all that, but I'm hoping what you come up with gives us a range to consider and options to consider for the future.
Sure,
and because somehow we have to come up with a budgeted amount that how we're going to handle that. And I often see a lot of things where it's not just the price of water, it's banking it, it's transferring it and everything. And hopefully you put the best number you can to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
so
I'm sort of expecting a
sure,
spreadsheet.
and
Yeah.
when we put our finalized program together, we will be giving you multiple options. What I want to say in general to that is that I think it's highly unlikely that there's going to be a one-stop shop where you're going to, we've been tasked, for example, to find somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 acre-feet per year. I think it's highly unlikely that there's going to be a one-stop shop that will be able to provide all that. So it will be presenting you with options of multiple different ways of how you can get to that number, and that number, what we can give you is factual data on what is available now, and then make some sensitivity analyses off of that to say, look, where might water move from that point, to give you an estimate off of that. But yes, that is our intention.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about the report before we do the discussion on the Water Smart grant opportunity? All right, let us know about that grant opportunity.
Sure. So thank you and good afternoon. One of the reasons why we wanted to bring this forward to you is we've been in the process, as we mentioned in our report, of finding potential funding sources. And one of the things that had come out was seeing this Bureau of Reclamation Water Smart grant. The Water Smart grant, as I mentioned, is through the Bureau of Reclamation. It's an annual program that the Bureau of Reclamation has multiple different grant opportunities through the Water Smart program, but this one in particular pertains to the program here. It's a program that would provide 50% matching funds to an eligible agency, which you would be eligible to be able to apply for this. And it would be able to match approximately $130,000 of what you have already committed. So you guys have already, for example, put in for our contract for water marketing services. It would be able to match at everything with the exception of the funding sources and direct lobbying that we are doing. Okay, so really tasks 1, 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 4 would be able to be matched. So that's approximately $130,000. The grant specifically focuses on a couple of different areas, and it's asking for programs that would focus on marketing strategies for building water markets to provide water supplies and increase water supply reliability. And it would ask for 3 different focuses. Before I begin on that, it also, the reason why we think that this would be pertinent is that it's not just a move forward program. It allows you to build on and work that's already been completed to date. So, for example, you've already, as I mentioned, committed the funds and resources. It would allow you to continue to build on that and get matching funds for that. There's 3 particular areas that it focuses on: doing outreach and partnership building. Second, scoping and planning activities. And that scoping and planning activities is a pretty wide range of potential areas where that could focus on. It could include things like doing hydrologic modeling, economic and financial modeling for, how are we going to be able to pay for this, as well as legal analyses for how water would be moved and implemented. It prioritizes applications from 2 different areas. First, it wants to prioritize applications from authorities and agencies that have the inclusion of multiple stakeholders. And clearly on this board, there's multiple stakeholders. And considering even within the Kern County area, if I'm not mistaken, there's at least 7 groundwater sustainability agencies that will be submitting groundwater sustainability plans by the end of the year. So there's clearly multiple stakeholders in this area that have an interest in finding water resources. And second, it's going to prioritize areas that would have significant benefits. So meeting imported water supply needs is one of the areas that I identify as significant benefits. So I think there's a lot of areas where the work that we're already doing, you can leverage those resources for multiple years beyond. So that grant would allow you to in this program, do 2 years beyond where we are right now. So you could match that for up to 2 more years. So what we're asking for is direction on if this is something that you would like us to pursue. It's due July 31st, so there's a quick time frame and turnaround on that. So that's the reason why we brought it to your attention today, because if it is the direction of the board for us to move forward on this, we're going to need to move quickly on this. Second, and I'll kick this back to Jeff as well, we would need some assistance in reviewing, and we've discussed this in terms of the documentation and moving forward on putting together the WaterSmart grant, and I'll let Jeff talk a little bit more about maybe where we think Stetson would help us in that.
Yeah, I reviewed the grant solicitation package, and the bulk of it is, of course, the scope of work for doing the water marketing. That's clearly Jeff and his group. But, he'll need some background descriptions of the basin, things we've already worked up about our needs, our stakeholders, maybe some mapping to go with that. And then we've prepared WaterSmart grants before. We could provide review and some input and comment into their draft package.
What do you? I'm always one for going for money. There's no doubt about it. If we're eligible for it, what you're telling me is parts 1 and 3 of what we've already approved for Capital Core would qualify. Which sections of the work?
Everything with the exception of there's a prohibition on direct lobbying.
Okay.
So everything with the exception of that would be eligible for matching funds, and that's where we're getting the approximately $130,000 would be eligible for matching funds through this grant.
That's your first go at. Can you boost that up to maybe $200,000? I see where you're going with it.
It's specifically a 50% match.
Right.
So it would.
So who are we proposing writes this grant? I guess.
The bulk of it, we believe, would be with their group, because the bulk of it, the key is the scope, the schedule, the budget for the work that they're doing. So they're well suited for that.
Okay. And my next question is, what is that going to cost us?
So one of the things that we had one of the things that we had potentially discussed is there a possibility? We're assuming that it would take approximately 30 hours. To write, okay, and is there a possibility where we could divert some resources that have already been budgeted within our particular scope of work to focus on that grant, and that would be the direction that we'd be asking for.
I think that's what we can hope for, is that they look at how can they reallocate if possible.
Does the grant cover the cost of preparing the grant request?
That's a good question. I don't believe so.
No, I don't think it does.
All right. Any other comments? I see something coming from Scott.
Do we have a rough estimate of the cost from Stetson?
You're asking about the cost of repair?
Yeah.
Oh, you're saying 30 hours, Jeff. Put that in dollars.
He was saying 30 hours, but I was saying from the work that Stetson would do. Do we have a rough estimate of the cost that would be incurred on your end?
We're thinking $2,000 or $3,000 of work is what we would need to do on the review and maybe some mapping if they need it.
And then the additional 30 hours that
would be approximately $6,000.
And you were wondering if there's a way to use the previously approved amount
to investigate.
Budget that in.
Yes.
So I want to be clear about this particular grant. It's basically, you can call it a grant for continuing study of the program and laying the programs out. Is that correct?
And yes, it's a continuation of what we're doing. But again, like I mentioned, there's elements beyond what we're doing right now. So if there's more hydrologic work to be done, if there's more economic and finance work to be done. There's multiple different avenues where you can go down.
And the grant would allow that?
Yes.
You're probably hearing all these questions because we're skeptical about free money at the end of the day. I mean, at the end of the day, is what you're telling us that we will have additional funding beyond what we already would have and above and beyond what we would expend to get the funding. that's what we're going to have at the end of the day?
If this grant is awarded. Now, obviously, I can't guarantee that the grant will be awarded, but yes, if the grant is awarded, it would be a 50% match of up to that amount. And they have discretion to the amount of total that they would award, but it could be awarded up to $130,000.
And if the grant's not awarded, we're out the cost of preparing the grant request.
Correct.
And it's 30 hours at what rate?
Our blended rate is approximately $200 an hour, so it would be about $6,000.
So 2 things to clarify, I guess, if I might. One is the $130,000 is something we're already committed to spending, so we wouldn't be spending any additional funds. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that's our match. And then the $6,000, whatever it is, you're saying that you can divert that from another task in your proposal, so there would be no additional cost to the Groundwater Authority.
Correct. Yeah, it would be nothing beyond what you've already committed.
So essentially, there's no additional cost to what's already being expended. Correct?
Yes.
And so you're saying, Don, that we already have 130 invested in it?
We have committed through Capital Corps that $130,000 for their work. So that's already committed and spent, and that would be used as the 50% match. There would be no additional funds. That's correct.
Yes.
Right.
What's the staff? I'm sorry, what's the staff's recommendation?
If you're asking my recommendation, the fact that it doesn't cost, essentially not costing us anything, if they're willing to divert whatever that 30 hours is worth from another task, there's no additional cost. I don't see the downside to it.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, and I think you're going to say your recommendation is the same either way, but if we're removing costs from tasks that would otherwise be performed for these new tasks, then if we're going to fully account for the work that we would otherwise have expected to be done under the existing contract, we would probably need a contract amendment to capture all of that we diverted to the grant funding, which at the end of the day is a relatively small amount, I understand, of the total contract for Capital Corps at this point in time. But with that clarification, that your recommendation is still the same, I assume. Like, it's worth the cost of making the effort, even if we're not successful.
Would a contract amendment be necessary? Because I think in other proposals, there's always, for example, the plan we're moving, those are fluid amounts to those tasks. We're not doing amendments to the contract for those.
I
guess I just see
I probably wasn't clear enough in my hypothetical. The hypothetical being Capital Corps does exactly what they said they were going to do and charges a full amount of what they said they were going to charge for exactly what they said they were going to do under the existing contract. What we're proposing to do is take some of those funds and divert them to this task. And so we would be underfunded for the full scope and the full cost of the current contract. That's the hypothetical. But what I'm expecting is that your recommendation is that we still go forward with this because it's worth the risk of not receiving the grant, and it's because of the upside of receiving the grant if we do at the end of the day.
I didn't clearly understand what you said. I couldn't hear you.
Did anybody else follow me?
I think what he's saying is that if he diverts...
I just couldn't hear what he said close to the mic.
Yeah, if he diverts roughly $6,000 from the original task, do we lose something there because we're spending it creating this grant? That's what I think. In other words, do we lose something within the original scope because you're diverting some hours over to this job? And I think that's what John. That's how I understand it. And is that anybody else have a?
But if we were awarded the grant, we would possibly be able to do those 30 hours of tasks after the fact.
Yeah.
And I assume those would be the least 30 hours important for what they're doing right now. So.
And you said there's other grants available through the Water Smart program that we may or may not be eligible for as time goes on?
Yes, and that's something that we're continuing to explore, and
Okay.
will be part of our funding sources strategic plan when we present that to you.
So this would be their chance to get to know us a little bit.
Yes, and like I said, the only reason why we've brought this so quickly is that there's a tight deadline on whether you want to pursue this or not.
So I guess with the staff, and you are asking, you're looking for board approval to pursue this grant. Is that what we're asking here?
Yes.
Anything else from the board before I go to public comment?
Don, this is Bob.
Yes, Bob.
Yeah, this to me seems like it is a contract amendment because the contract specifically calls out the scope of work that's in the proposal as Exhibit A and specifically says that the consultant shall not be compensated for any services nor reimbursed for any expenses in excess of those authorized by this agreement or any task order without prior written approval by the authority. So if it is a contract amendment, the public was not aware that we were going to be discussing a contract amendment today because all we had on the agenda was general manager's report. There was no description on the agenda about what was proposed here. So I'm just curious legally how we can authorize this, what appears to be a contract amendment, unless I'm missing something in the contract that gives our acting general manager the authority to revise the scope.
The agenda item says discussion and board direction regarding this grant opportunity. If there needs to be a contract amendment, I would just make it part of the motion. I think that this agenda item is sufficiently agendized and discussed where you can do whatever you need.
And I take it wouldn't be a complex amendment to the, you would just take something from one part and move it into another. I mean, would it be sounds to me like it'd be a very simple amendment.
It would be very quick.
It'd be very quick. That's what I thought. All right. Bob, are you satisfied with that answer?
Well,
I see the language on the agenda, but as I understood, what was mentioned before by Don was that the public had not seen these reports.
The board packet is posted on the website, but I can't vouch that every member of the public that's on the distribution list reads that document fully. That was my statement.
Is it the case, and I don't have the entire contract memorized, and I don't think many people do, but for example, identify and secure funding sources under Task 3, would that be the scope of work that already exists that would allow them to shift funds into this scope that they hadn't already shifted funds into? Because if that's the case, then we don't need a contract amendment for the scope. It would just possibly be an amendment later on down the line for the cost. But again, if we got the grant, then the grant should cover any additional cost that we might not have anticipated. So that's my question. Is the contract scope of work already broad enough to accommodate what we're looking at doing here today?
Honestly, I just completed this yesterday afternoon. I received it rather late. I have not had the opportunity to look at the original contract since then. I don't see why this is an issue. If the board wants to pursue that, direct staff to do whatever is necessary to go. If a contract amendment is needed, we'll amend the contract. And part of the motion would give us that authority.
I understand. Any other questions before I?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't like the process we're going through here. This is the second time today that we're being put in a spot where we're making a hamburger in front of the public. I just don't like the way this whole thing has turned out. I didn't like the earlier part when we talked about severely disadvantaged communities, the water audits and the leak detection stuff. But we can go through that and we'll fix that. My issue is this, why is this out of scope? Why is applying for this grant out of the scope of your contract? It looks like it's right in your wheelhouse.
It is within our scope, but we did mention that if there were going to be grant writing, it is within the way that we wrote our proposal that grants would be in addition. Doing grant writing would be in addition.
It says here, your job is to identify and secure funding sources.
I would have to pull up the specifics, but we did make mention in our proposal that grant writing services would be in addition to.
Okay.
It sounds like we're in violent agreement because I think John said the same thing about it looks like it's within the scope of their contract already. So why do we need to have an amendment? So I don't disagree with that, but that's up to legal to make that decision. And I sort of agree with Jim that if we were to just, as a board, give the staff permission to move ahead with this, that those things would sort themselves out. Any other questions before I open to the public?
And Ron, I get legally we could do it that way. I'm not used to not having a contract amendment in front of me. So I get that we have the authority based on the agenda that says discussion and direction. That's just not the way I'm used to operating. So I'd prefer in the future. It makes sense to go after this grant, but I'd prefer in the future that we actually get an agenda item that has a specific recommendation, and if it requires a contract amendment, we should know that beforehand and have that in front of us.
I don't disagree with you, Bob. I think it's a time frame issue. If this grant wasn't due till, let's say, the end of August instead of end of July, then it would be possible to continue moving on that type of route. But this sort of came up pretty quickly and was found sort of pretty quickly. So I never like to move ahead on something based on the necessary speed, but I think that we need to try to make this work. That's just my opinion.
And I get that, but they had time to write a 3-page memo, so I think we had time to write a half-page contract amendment.
All right. Anything from the public?
Yes. Judy Decker, go for it. Because if you have to write an amendment, you have to think about how much it's going to cost your legal counsel to write that amendment. Go for it.
Renee West-Delusk, I just have one clarification. Besides the $6,000 that Capital Corps will spend, Stetson will charge us. Is it going to be $3,000?
That's our estimate of what we would need to do to support it, yes.
And it's not in our budget, so we have to find the money for that. So it's actually going to be like $9,000 to do this. Okay, that's all I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Wes Katzenstein, PAC member representing domestic wells. Did I understand that within the scope of what you'd be bidding for, you could also include some modeling? Did I understand you to say that?
There is some inclusion for hydrologic, yes.
I wonder if perhaps we could get matching funds for some of the modeling work that we're doing. Just a thought.
Anything else from the public? I guess I'll bring it back to the board. Jim, do we need a motion here to proceed or just a recommendation for what do we need? You tell me.
At this point, I would make a motion. If the board is so inclined, I'd recommend a motion to authorize Capital Corps to pursue this Water Smart grant, to authorize staff to do all things necessary in that regard.
Do I hear a motion based on what Mr. Jim said? Sounds like I'm not.
I'd motion to authorize them to go ahead and the Capital Corps to pursue the Smart Water grant.
All right, thanks. Do I hear a second? Am I allowed to second it? Then I'll second it. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask for a vote.
Director Vallejo,
I'm going to abstain.
Director Heyman,
Yes.
Chairman Kaczynski,
Yes.
Director Page,
Yes.
Vice Chair Gleason.
Yes.
All right. Anything else in the manager report you need to bring up, Don, before I move on?
No.
All righty. Let's go on to closing comments. So we can start with our newest member. Anything you'd like to say down there besides you're glad to be with us?
Well, besides meeting
Is that thing on? Besides meeting length, I'm happy to be here.
Oh, this is a short one. Commander?
Yeah, you got to incorporate some breaks in here.
Yes, I would like to respond. We've had several requests from the PAC, the TAC, and from the board for some information, some historic information on pumping and personnel sizes with the installation here in the Valley. And I have a letter here from the installation commanding officer promulgating a report that includes that information, essentially our demographic information and well pumping here. And I'd just like to point out, hey, we are providing this for you all in your planning purposes with the GSP, but it doesn't necessarily constitute our Federal Reserve water right. But I have that here. I'll provide that to the staff at the end of the meeting.
Great. Thank you so much. We've been waiting on that. Director Heyman?
No comments.
Director Gleason? John?
I'd just like to reiterate what Director Page and Director Gleason mentioned regarding the agenda items and staff reports. It would be very helpful if we had at least a paragraph from staff with each agenda item that we're on to discuss. Oftentimes I'm arriving to these meetings and not quite sure exactly what the plan of action is for any particular agenda item. And I think we would be well served to have a little more structure built in around how we put the agendas together and how we conduct our business. And I'm not pointing fingers at any particular agency or any individual. I think that's somewhat the nature of what we are at this point, with so many different agencies involved without a lead and dedicated staff that's solely focused on this agency. But I think we need to put a little more focus on our process, and I think that would be better for everyone involved in the groundwater basin.
Thank you. Bob, do you have any comments?
No additional comments. Thank you.
All righty. I just want to thank the board and thank the public. I know this was a long meeting, and I surely appreciate it. The next meeting is scheduled, looks like July 18th, same place, 10 a.m. With that, I'll adjourn the open session, and we'll retire to closed session in 15 minutes. 10 minutes. I got overridden.